So this week I have Kavin, um, a freelance writer, full time, who lives in New Jersey. And Kim, I am very glad you're joining us here today.
I'm very excited to be here to talk to all my fellow allies in this fight about protecting independent contractor work.
That's right. So what Kim and I are going to talk about today is the other side of AB5. Those of us who want to remain independent contractors and be able to make our own decisions as to how we work, where we work, and who we work with, and what tools and everything we do to do that work. So, Kim, can you give us a little introduction on yourself?
Sure. I'm the kid who blew the bell curve in English class when you were in school. I won the spelling bee in grammar school, and I was the editor of the high school newspaper. And I went off to journalism school at the University of Missouri, and I came out and I spent about a decade working for daily newspapers, which I loved. But this awful thing happened to me in 1997. I was coming home from work. I was walking into my apartment building, and a man I didn't know, had never met, who for many years, it turned out, had been suffering in and out of hospitals and jails with paranoid schizophrenia. He got hold of me from behind, and he beat me unconscious, and he tried to stab me to death with a kitchen knife, just because he was off his meds and having these horrible visions of women in pools of blood and all this really bad stuff. So I developed this thing you may have heard people talk about with war veterans called post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think a lot of people, so a lot of people have heard of this. And I had to get into some pretty serious therapy to try to get that under control. And you very quickly realize that trying to get post-traumatic stress disorder under control and sitting under a police scanner on a daily newspaper metro desk, these are not things that work very well together in terms of your stress level being where you need to get it to be. So I ended up leaving that job and going to work for a boating magazine in the next state over in Connecticut. And I became the executive editor of this national boating magazine. And that was where I learned that freelance writing even existed. This magazine had all these freelance writers who maybe they were former.
I'm sorry, this was what year again?
This was in 2000. I went to that magazine.
Okay.
And they had all these freelance writers who maybe they were former boat captains, or they were naval architects, or they were guys who used to own boat dealerships. Whatever they were, they had this incredible expertise in the subject matter. And I started to realize just how much work these kinds of freelance writers were getting. And when I did the math, some of them were making more money than I was making in a year. And I was the executive editor, the number 2 on the staff. And I thought, well, I'm a good writer. And, I had at that point, after about 3 years, developed a pretty good expertise of my own in the little area of boating known as charter, where people book these boats for a week and go on these vacations, these private little vacations. And I thought, well, why can't I do that? Then I would be in full control of my schedule. If I have a bad night of nightmares, I can just sleep in the next day and start writing at 11 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. I'm in my own home office, so there's no chance I'm going to get triggered by something that sets off my PTSD. And I can make as much, if not more money. And P.S., get rid of all the sexist nonsense that goes on with women in the workforce anyway. And so in 2003, I just up and quit my job and decided to become a freelance writer and editor. Now, and again, this is years before Uber. Uber came to be in 2009. Lyft was in 2012. I predated all that when I created my little limited liability company in 2005 and became full-time freelance writer and editor.
Okay. So, and since that has been what you've done.
Yeah, and it's been great. And not just for the boating magazines. If people Google me, they're going to find me everywhere from the Washington Post to Entrepreneur Magazine to book publishing. I've written a bunch of books, all kinds of things that I've gotten to do that have just been fantastic. And I make way more than I ever did on a staff job anywhere. And I'm super happy and healthy and very, very rarely have to deal with that PTS stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel you on that. Like example, when I had Vina on, Vina Duval, I work for a laser company and actually lived in Miami, worked for them on a salary, which also comes into play a little bit when we start talking about ProAct. That never really gets mentioned, by the way, and we don't need to dive into that today. But when they talk about, you're only making X amount per hour, try a salary job, people.
Right. Right. I will hold up my
That's when you get
P&L.
abused on your time. Okay.
Yes, I will hold up my hourly earnings against anybody's in my business. Anybody's.
But so when I moved to Colorado in the late 90s and I left, my boss and I had a great relationship. And since all the work is done on the road, I continued doing that work and doing some of the plotting and mapping through our software at home, going and doing shows. I do some computer IT work, and I'm doing gig app-based on-demand gig platforms. So for me, there are no two ways around this, because nobody in the world would let me go do 5 months with Elton John on the road and just say time out on my job.
That sounds like super fun, by the way, with Elton
Right.
John on the road. Never
See,
got to do anything like
that
that
was
before.
actually that was the last thing I was doing before COVID, was filling in for a guy who had to get back to his wife who had just had their second baby. And so I went to fill in for him, and I was doing some of the East Coast shows through North Carolina. We went to Philly, we hit Cleveland, and it was right then that it was about to move over to Europe, and we were starting to hear about COVID. And here I was on the road in a bus, with other crew and stuff, and like we were all kind of taking like, and then we were all heading home, and everybody was really getting serious. By the time I got here, it was like to the day where it was like, you better lock yourself up, and I was like, uh-oh. And so but yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. Like for my scenario that I just described, and for what you're describing, there is not a way to do this. And I've owned businesses. I know that we can't, one of the things that can crush businesses the most is I owned a bar, or 2 bars, for many years. And I got to say that I've done every position in them, and that's what got me to buy them. But what'll kill you in the bar industry is a payroll. And that's why they have a specific minimum wage for bartenders and servers, because they know the tips will outweigh. So therefore you make like 213 or $3 as a bartender, but you'll pull 40 an hour. It's just that somehow the law exempts that and brings it down. So I think that's another case for, here's a perfect example of a exemption before AB5 and all this existed, because that's been going on since, well, predating probably me being alive.
I never worked in a bar, but during my college years, might have started in high school. Definitely during college, I dished pizza at a pizza joint on the Jersey Shore, and we'd lean our heads out the window to see how long the lines were at the bars to get in, and that's how we knew what the rush would be. And it's just what you said. I don't think I got paid hardly anything by the hour, but I'd go home with hundreds and hundreds of dollars in my hand in tips during that bar rush. And it was great money. It helped me pay my way through the expenses that I had for college.
Yeah. I mean, I know the industry well enough that I wouldn't, if somebody was making, if they were offering me $10 an hour, I would walk out of the interview, because I would know your restaurant's dead. You don't make any money, and I'm not going to earn here.
Well, this is how a lot of the freelance writers I know, the professional freelance writers, they think about these staff jobs that get posted, and we're like, it's just not worth it. I'm doing better out here on my own, and I want to stay this way, which is why AB5 and everything that followed just has us so angry.
So I know that you're a big voice on Twitter. I see you, and I see who are the big voices, and I've had Lisa on, or Lisa Rothstein, and I've had Gail Gordon on, and I'm really glad to have you here today, because you seem to be somebody who puts stuff out there, and you're one of the people that, I mean, there's a large group of no AB5 on Twitter. If people out there don't know, or if some of my listeners don't get on Twitter, I know some of you don't, you're on the other platforms. I'm sure it's going on there too, but on Twitter, it's very predominant. And that's the primary platform that I'm on, even though I do post on them all. That's the one I kind of live on, because I get my information quick. So I like Twitter. But you are one of the very predominant ones when it comes to AB5 stuff. I could probably list like 5 or 6 of you that I know of, who I think of the ones that are always in the feed.
Well, that's amazing to me because I didn't even have my Twitter feed until the end of 2019 when they tried to pass a version of AB5 here in New Jersey. I created it's at the Kim Kavin, and I created it specifically to fight these ABC test laws because I realize as a person who works in media, Twitter is where the journalists and the politicians are. It's the only reason I'm there, and it's
Right.
the only thing that I tweet about on the Kim Kavin Twitter handle.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think that's the only reason, though. You seem to put out a lot of good content. You seem to have a lot of good information and knowledge on the subject. I know you're in New Jersey, not California, and we are talking about California AB5 here. However, I've discussed many times on the podcast that, Massachusetts, New Jersey, both of those have been targets. Washington State. I mean, let's put it this way: all states are targeted right now under the PRO Act, for one. But even the AB5 model is specifically targeting a handful of states right now, and I know New Jersey's been one for a while.
We were supposed to come next after California,
But now,
and
if I'm correct, it almost looks like Massachusetts getting that real push right now.
so Massachusetts already has this version of the ABC test. There's only 2 states that do, which is one of the very often repeated falsehoods by the other side that I'd like to correct here today.
Yeah, let's.
They even said it before the US Senate Help Committee a couple months ago. They got up there and said, this ABC test is in more than half the states. What's the problem? Why can't we get it federal in the PRO Act too? It's a lie. It's not true. There are various versions of the ABC test. And some, I know you've talked in depth about the ABC test on your show. Some of them don't even include that horrible B prong that says you can't be in the same line of work as the company that's paying you, that destroys anybody who has any expertise in anything.
So you're saying that some of the states' explanation of ABC type thing is their B prong isn't what California's is.
Correct. For New Jersey's is not what California's is. And so Massachusetts was the first state to enact this particular version of the ABC test. And it was a number of years ago. And since then, the courts have stepped in and stopped them from doing the kinds of things that AB5 that they've been trying to do in California. So the court stepped in and said, you can't go after the truckers this way. The courts in Massachusetts, they stepped in and said, you can't go over the franchise industry. You'll destroy the entire franchise industry. What are you people talking about? So that has been going on for a while in Massachusetts. And then this particular version, this very strict, restrictive version of the ABC test got put forward in California. And when that happened, all the craziness that happened in California. And it led to what was supposed to be this roller coaster where it got enacted in a bunch of other states, starting with my home state of New Jersey. And that was when we all rose up and said, hang on a minute. No.
Yeah. The way I look at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see it is, and before the show, Kim and I were talking a little bit, we both have a major passion for the truck drivers too. So it's kind of a common bond of ours on top of everything else here too. But as I understand it, the Dynamex decision kind of was AB5, and then it was as I'm just going to put it in a different term, but it was kind of like sitting there collecting dirt. And then all of a sudden taxis are dying out around the country, obviously. But the taxi industry is dying. And if the taxi industry is dying, the unions don't have those million people in, or whatever it is per capita in each state, whatever. They're losing them all. And they see this trend. They're not dumb. They're watching it. And they're like, okay, well, we need to replace that trend. Well, that trend became, I think the original attack was supposed to be on the on-demand app-based industry. And then somehow got ballooned and expanded to cover everybody that works for themselves.
Right. So you have to go back even a few years before Dynamex to understand the thinking that's at play here. What year was Dynamex? 2018? Was that Dynamex?
I was even going to say earlier, but
maybe. It was in 2014 that a guy named David Wheel published this book called The Fissured Workplace. I don't know if have you talked about this on your show yet?
Never.
Okay. So David Wheel was a professor, a liberal professor, who published this book called The Fissured Workplace in 2014. His thesis is that back in the 1950s and 60s, when we had these giant corporations that were filled with unions, everything was better for everybody. Everything could be more easily regulated by the government. The unions could keep tabs on what the big corporations were doing. Life was just grand and wonderful, which I think anyone who lived through the 1950s and 60s and was not a white, straight man might argue with. But this is his philosophy. He talks about it as if these companies were like planets with a couple of little moons orbiting around them. And then he explains how what has happened today is that whole thing has fissured. We have a fissured workplace, is his terminology, where instead of the big planet and all the little moons, we now have way too many little moons. And it's just all become too unruly. And we have to fix everything and put it back together, put together what's broken. And if you listen to what David Wheel is saying and think about the term fissured workplace, you can draw a straight line from that book through the academic work of people like Vina Dubal, straight into the ABC test legislation like AB5 and the PRO Act, and into the hearings that are going on right now in Massachusetts about their Prop 22 style battle. The term fissured workplace has come up with all of them. Vina Dubal cited this term in the second paragraph of a paper she wrote in 2017, to your point about the taxi industry. We saw it show up here in New Jersey. It was in the first paragraph in the summer of 2019 of our governor's big fat report on misclassification that led to our AB5 copycat bill. This is the thinking that these people have, and it's not just about the taxi industry. They believe it for the whole of the workplace, that this rise of independent contractors everywhere who are there too many little moons that can't be unionized and overseen, this is what they see as the problem. And they're trying to take us back to the way it used to be.
Right. And my problem with this is, I mean, like I have one. Okay.
Which problem do you want to start with?
One of my big problems with this is, and this moves a little besides AB5, but it's something we talk about often here is the PRO Act, because I have a lot of listeners who live in right to work states. And I've had the question sprung on me so many times, well, we're a right to work state, so the PRO Act wouldn't do anything to our state. I'm like, you better be careful, man. You better be aware, because the PRO Act, as I understand it, dismantles the right to work states. It takes away your right to work states.
That the intent is to grow unions, and you can't do that if people have the right to work without joining the unions. It's just that simple. And they want to go back to the 50s.
I've even heard as far as though, let's say that, in a right to work state, I can't remember where this was from. This might have been when I had the gig worker collective on or something, but they had said that, if 50.0001% had voted that they don't want a union, then they wouldn't have it. The other way they would have it. Well, if 50.001, even if this is the true way, were to vote that they wanted the union, as I understand it, the other percentage that do not want a union would, all of their names and information would be given to these companies. I mean,
that's what I understand too from the PRO Act. Yeah.
Right. We would have the old school days of, I'm initially from Michigan, so we would have those gangster days of like Detroit unions knocking on your door.
Come on out to New Jersey and ask us how that goes out here too. Yeah, same
exactly
thing.
But I'm saying, like, that's how I've seen it and how I've been told by many people is that, listen, like, not only does it dismantle and destroy it, it also allows them to have all of your information and know that you're not with them.
Well, and it's very
clear, and they'll still make you pay the dues too.
Of course. And it's very clear that they don't care that we don't want to join. And we can get into this, but I mean, I don't even know how many lawmakers I've spoken to now at the federal and state level who either A, don't know what independent contractors are, B, have no idea about years and years of research showing most of us are happy this way and choosing to do this. We're not being forced into this or exploited. And C, we have no desire to join a union. We don't want any part of this. They don't know any of these things. And so the people pushing these laws through are using that kind of bullying attitude that you just described. And it mixes in with this just general ignorance about how millions of Americans earn income every day. And it creates this mess that we're in right now.
So I know that you listened to the Vina Dubal interview that I did. Specifically, I'm going to talk about a couple points where I have some questions. I want to know your take on it, because when we got to, let's say, flex time, okay, a term that all of us are familiar with, even though it's maybe not as prominent with like writers and graphic artists and things of that nature, they still have an understanding of what it means. Being able to work at your will when you want. It's your business. When I brought that up, it kind of looped around a little bit. I was like, well, flex time will be gone. And she's like, no, they don't have to take away flex time. And I said, I remember saying, they don't have to, but they will. And if not, I was simply just asking, otherwise tell me one major company that allows you to just come in whenever you want and work. Because I don't know one. So with that, and with the flex hours, if they were gone, this whole thing falls apart, the whole way that all of this works. And a lot of us love it the way it works. 85% of app-based on-demand employees work 85% work 20, I think it's 25 now, it was 25 hours or less a week, meaning they're taking in other income from another place, and they must flex around that. Or they're just doing it part-time or whatever, and they work when they can. They work around their kids, all kinds of things. And without flex, it's gone. And eventually in that conversation, if you noticed, she got down, or both of us got down to the point where I think we even agreed. It just took a while to have her say it, which was, well, of course they'll have to limit the people on the platform. And that's where I become with, I think that the companies do need to have some kind of responsibility to make sure you're not overloaded, and there could be different ways of going about this. However, what her and I finally touched on, and then it was just moved on after we finally kind of hit that point, was that at a certain, I'm like, well, but 20,000 people doing work in a certain area might turn into 2,000. And she's like, right, but that's better than 20,000 working it and all of them only getting part-time. And it really confused me, because I was like, this is going to blow up. I was like, when they threatened Uber and Lyft, AB5 went into effect January 2020. And when they threatened Uber and Lyft in, I think it was February or March of a date, and at midnight, Uber and Lyft said, we're leaving the state. And they'd never turned around and folded their cards. It was the state of California that turned around, because Prop 22 wasn't being voted on for another 9 months, and said you can have a stay until the November election. But they were ready to move on. They were already talking about franchise models and this and that and the other, and things that would just destroy everything about these platforms.
Yeah, the problem you ran into in that interview on that specific point with Vina Dubal is you challenged one of their main talking points, and they don't like it when we push back. This talking point that the way it's usually said to us in meetings with lawmakers and their aides is, there's nothing in these ABC test laws that prevents companies from giving workers any schedule they want. In fact, the US Senate sponsor of the PRO Act, she wrote a whole other bill that went nowhere in 2019 called the Worker Flexibility and Small Business Protection Act. She was going to try to make it law that a company had to bring everybody on as an employee, but let them keep working as if they were independent contractors. And they keep coming back to this line, there's nothing stopping companies from doing this. And what I always respond is, well, there's also nothing stopping companies from giving everybody in America a Lamborghini and a pony. I don't see that happening either. It's just silly to anyone who has ever held a real job or owned a company to say that the labor can just do whatever they want. Who's ever going to work the shift that ends at 10 o'clock on a Friday night? Nobody. Of course they're not going to.
Well, but they are if they need the money and they push too hard on this. I happen to think that, at least in the app-based world and the people I communicate with often, I happen to think that a lot of them truly don't. I mean, I've brought up to them, like, if this goes through, you become an employee, you get your schedule, and they're like, no, that's the thing. We won't have a schedule. I'm like, wow. I mean, like, I don't even know where to take it from there, because I'm like, guys, you really don't. I don't understand how you don't understand. Of course,
That's
you'd
just
have a schedule.
fantasy land. I call that living full time in fantasy land. You're not understanding how business works.
Right. It's almost, I almost believe they think it'll work the exact same way it does, but they'll have a floor payment.
Yeah,
And that's, you're not going to be able to sit on your couch and cherry pick rides. In fact,
no, you're not.
In fact, the acceptance rate for the first time ever would matter. It would be, you take every ride we send you or you're fired.
Because you're now an employee, and they can do
Yes.
that when you're an employee. Well, and to the second point you bumped up against there with her in that one question, the idea of, well, all the work will just go away. And their ultimate answer is, well, yeah, we're okay with that. That's true. And we know that from the writer's perspective too, because in early 2019, when AB 5 was still being crafted and moving through the legislature, the former heads of the American Society of Journalists and Authors, as well as the Society of American Travel Writers, they went to meet with Lorena Gonzalez. And the head of the travel writers group, he brought this stack of magazines with him. He had been contributing articles to many, many magazines, but this one particular one, he had sold 122 articles since 2001. Think of all that money and all that content. And he was happy with the relationship. It was one of many, many clients that he had. And he had gotten a letter from that publisher that said, because of the ABC test in the Dynamex decision, he was no longer welcome to submit content. Nobody from California, no writers from California were welcome to submit content anymore. And they went to talk to Lorena Gonzalez and said, we want you to fix the problem Dynamex created for the writers. Don't make it worse with AB 5 going into law. As you know, as everyone listening to this show well knows, her attitude is, who cares? That's what we want to happen. We're okay with you people losing all your income. That's the posture of the folks pushing these bills.
So Lorena Gonzalez is an elected official, for those of you who don't know, in San Diego. And I don't understand how you think you're going to have constituents, or, this isn't a political show, but how you're going to keep your constituents if your platform is, we know that this is going to secure some jobs, maybe, but it's going to eliminate a ton. How is that a platform that anybody of either party or in the middle or far either way runs on?
I can actually answer that question.
Well,
and I don't,
please do.
I'm not saying I very clearly am opposed to that platform, but I can tell you where they're coming from. These fissured workplace people. Lorena Gonzalez is a Teamster. She is a person whose campaign backing comes from the unions. The guy who introduced the AB 5 copycat bill out here in New Jersey gets paid, or he did at that time, got paid $65,000 a year to be the president of our state Senate. He got $250,000 a year to be the vice president of the Iron Workers Union. Who is it that we think these people are really working for when they're making this legislation? When I went in to speak with that guy here in New Jersey, I received the same kind of audience that the writers in California had received when they went to talk to Lorena Gonzalez. I sat down and tried to explain, I'm not being exploited. I'm a professional person. There's all kinds of professional people in all kinds of industries who are going to be swept up in this thing. His response to me was to sit behind his desk, make air quotes, and laugh at me and say, freelance writer. What does that even mean, freelance writer? And he just burst into laughter like it was a joke. We are roadkill. They have decided we are acceptable collateral damage in their path to rebuilding the 1950s and the giant unions and the big company power.
Yeah, but the problem is that the big problem is they don't have, they don't have the jobs by any numbers to actually take care of people. Even if we did want to go along with such a thing where we wanted, okay, we'll all just take union jobs, whatever. There aren't enough jobs.
But see, that doesn't matter to them because their goal isn't to create jobs for everyone. Their goal is to get as much money as they can for the unions. So if even 10% of people get turned into employees, there's 59 million independent contractors in this country.
If not more now. I know that the stat you're
Possibly.
using, but post-pandemic now, we're seeing
Could
people
be.
quitting and coming on. And
Right. Now, some of those people are earning partial income as independent contractors. Some of them are like me, and I think you, earning all of our income as independent contractors. There's a big swath of, and they're doing all different kinds of work, everything from driving for Uber to, bookkeeping for various accounting firms. There's all kinds of people doing this. If you only get even 10% of those people to become employees and you unionize them, well, the unions just got the biggest, fattest payday that they can imagine since the 1940s. They still win. That's
right.
why this is their posture. It's not about what's best for all of us. It's about what's best for growing the unions.
Right. And, oddly enough, between the Vina interview and ours today, I don't know, you must have noticed, but I remember seeing something in the Sacramento Bee. I think I even shared it on uberliftdrivers.com about, it was kind of odd. It was a few days after the Vina interview posted, was that one of the big union people over there was like arrested in this huge scandal. I can't remember his name or whatever, but I mean, it was huge money, huge.
It was big news in California. Yeah. And I'm sure you're well aware, and your listeners are too, that's not even remotely the first time a union boss has gone down for corruption in this country.
Right.
Not even close.
That's what I was going to say. That was part of my thing about, like, when I was saying I'm from Michigan, like, I didn't want some of those people who voted in the 49% to not be union in a right to work state to become Jimmy Hoffa's. You know what I mean?
I don't want to come off as, if you had asked me in 2018, before all this mess started, am I pro-union? I would have told you yes. I grew up in a union household. My parents were public school teachers here in New Jersey, and we never had a lot of money, but we had a roof over our heads, and we had food, and we had health insurance, and they have pensions now that they're retired. I would have said I have absolutely no problem. And to this day, I have absolutely no problem with employees who want to get together and form a union. Mazel tov, good for you. Live long and prosper, all of that. My problem is that since AB 5, and then it became S4204 here in New Jersey, and the 6699A in New York, and now the PRO Act at the federal level, that's not what these people are doing. What these people are doing is trying to say, if you're not in an employee role, if you're not in a job that can be unionized, you shouldn't have the right to exist and earn a living. That's what this ABC test fight is about. And we're standing up and saying that is nonsense. Absolutely not.
For me as a worker, I want to do that, even if, like, some workers that I don't follow this to the degree I do, but they do know I don't. I like being an independent contractor. I have multiple income streams. I don't want to screw with anything. I like this. But honestly, why, I mean, I can maybe understand if they think that, improper taxes are being paid. And obviously that's something that is being thought, since now, if you sell a couch for $600, you're going to need to declare that. I mean, I've seen some really stupid legislation coming through lately where it's just like, we're going to have to claim every little thing. If you have a garage sale, if your kid has a garage sale or a lemonade stand that makes $601, he's got to claim it. I mean, this is just getting so over the top, but why would you not want everybody working? Why would you not? I mean, you're still taking in the taxes. I'm sure that there are people skirt tailing their taxes who are independent contractors. However, let's not forget that the 1% and many corporations are skirt tailing all of the taxes in the big picture.
I mean, all the professional writers I know operate the way I do. We have accountants to make sure we're not messing up our taxes. We don't want to be audited any more than the next guy. And I live in New Jersey. We pay taxes through the nose here in New Jersey for everything. So we ran into that argument when we tried to talk to the lawmakers here too. Well, how do we know you're paying your taxes? Well, look up my tax forms and look at the checks that I write every quarter. Of course we're paying our taxes. So as you say, are there always going to be people who skirt the law? Yeah, it's human behavior. That's going to happen. But the notion that just because you're an independent contractor, you're also a tax cheat. I mean, that's just stupid. That's just vilifying people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I just don't get it. I mean, you're talking about how they're how they're willing to accept the fact that, well, we may only be able to retain 10% of the workforce, but they're going to be union, so we're good with that. Why wouldn't you want, fine, let those people who want to be union, but why wouldn't you want everybody working?
Because you don't represent all the people. This is the thing we
Right, we
learned.
only represent 1/3 of America. I'm sorry, that's
I'm
quite
gonna
a
tell
chunk.
you, I'm gonna tell you a story. I haven't really told this story publicly before, but this speaks to directly what you're talking about. When we went and spoke to the assembly sponsor of our AB5 copycat bill out here in New Jersey. So you had the Senate guy who made the air quotes and laughed in my face. Then we went and tried to talk to the assembly guy about the bill. He called me on the phone and said he wasn't going to discuss his own bill with me, and that if I wanted any changes, I had to go negotiate directly with the New Jersey AFL-CIO. And I thought the guy was kidding, because that's like a constituent coming to you and saying, I have a problem with your gun control bill, and the lawmaker saying, well, go take it up with the NRA.
Right.
That's what this was. And I really thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. He set up the call and we were sent to go meet with the AFL-CIO. That's who's driving the bus. That's who's writing the bills. Their goal has nothing to do with the happiness of everyone, which is what lawmakers are supposed to be focused on. They're supposed to be focused on everybody possible to make everybody's lives as good as they can be. That's not what this is. This is people whose entire goal is to build unions and add dues paying members to unions. And the more independent contractors they can wipe out of the workforce, fine by then, doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just blows my mind though, because what do they think we're going to do? I mean,
well,
here, let me put it a little differently. The independent contractors I know, and I mean, I'm sure that there's a ton of exemptions, so people don't take this the wrong way out there. But the independent contractors I know work harder than anybody else I know, because it's their businesses and they understand that. They're not just going and punching a paycheck and they don't care. They don't really give a crap of how the business does. As long as the doors stay open and they get their check, they're fine. But they all go out and hustle. They go out. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot who don't. But the ones I know go out and hustle. They have multiple streams of income. They're always working. They're always running business in their head. I mean, we're hustling, we're getting product out there, we're taking care of all the needs of businesses. Where are they going to go? Because these businesses can't employ everybody. Now, stepping aside outside of the app-based world, even into more of like journalism and stuff like that. I mean, like I've talked to journalists and stuff who, even if they could be, these newspapers are they're not going to employ you.
Nor do we want to be there.
I understand that, but
yeah.
they wouldn't anyway.
No, those days are over. This was one of the things that Vina Duval said on your podcast that got my blood boiling, that she knows tons of freelance writers who want to be full-time professionals. I heard another person who adheres to these theories say it on a different podcast. This is one of their lines that they put out there. We have entire associations of professional freelance writers who choose this, who have chosen this for decades and are happier working this way. What happens is you get people who get laid off from a staff job who maybe didn't want to get laid off, and the business is failing. The layoffs are going to happen anyway, whether you like it or not. They got laid off. Now they're being forced to freelance. And they're terrible at it. They don't have the kind of entrepreneurial mentality that you just described, of thinking about it like a business and actually getting up and working in your home office. They don't do that. They just, they get mad. They can only sell one article a month and they say freelancing's horrible and nobody should be allowed to do this ever. And our answer to that is, just because you can't do it doesn't mean none of us can do it. Millions of us get up and do it every day and pay the mortgage this way. So take your AB5 ABC test laws and get off my lawn.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of my way of talking about that, which I do often on the podcast, is like, don't throw a grenade in my system, because it's not working for you, because there's a lot of other tanks out there that you can go get in.
It's exactly how I feel about the unions. I do not feel like I am at war with the AFL-CIO. I feel like the AFL-CIO has declared war on me. That is how this entire thing feels.
And so for those who don't know, what, if any, is the affiliation between them and the unions?
Well, the AFL-CIO is the biggest federation of unions in the country. They represent, what was the last number I saw? 12.5 million workers, something like that. And they have an incredible amount of power because of that. They're the ones who end up on TV talking about this stuff. They're the ones who have been invited numerous times to the White House to talk about this stuff. Independent contractors aren't even in the conversation. We're not even welcome in the building, in these buildings. We're not invited. When the U.S. Senate Help Committee held the most recent hearing on the PRO Act, that will affect 59 million independent contractors, misclassifying millions and millions of us as employees. They didn't invite a single independent contractor to testify.
Of course
we do not exist. We're the little air quotes joke that they're going to steamroll over while they do this.
Well, hopefully not. I think that all of our politicians are a hot mess, to be honest. I'm not a fan of many.
Well, I try not to be political about it. The thing we learned,
I try not to get political either. But.
Right. The thing, I mean, there is the fact it's the Democrats sponsoring these laws. There's no way around that. That's just fact. Because they get a lot of campaign contributions from the unions. It is just the way it is. But when you look at the people who are fighting against this, like if you look at our people out here in New Jersey, or with the group we created called Fight for Freelancers USA, it's a lot of liberals and progressive Democrats who are members of these groups and who have risen up to fight these things and who are saying, hang on, I'm with you on a lot of things, but stop attacking my livelihood, because that's not okay with me. So from my dog says hello, if you heard that just now. Sorry about that.
If as long as my dog doesn't hear it, then
yeah. What I'm getting at is this is a nonpartisan resistance, if that's what you want to call it.
Absolutely.
Without question.
I think that it gets built up like it's not. But if you go around and look, it absolutely is. You have independent voters, you have Democrats, you have Republicans, you have all of them, because no matter what their political views are, when it comes down to it, nobody wants to lose their income. Period.
Well, and not
be told
just
how to earn their income.
Exactly. And not just nonpartisan, but the span of socioeconomic levels and language speaking. I mean, when we went to testify against the AB5 copycat bill in New Jersey, I think they had 3 or 4 people there to testify on their side. One of them from the New Jersey AFL-CIO. One was the guy who sponsored the bill. They thought it was going to be a cakewalk getting that thing through. We filled that room and kept them there for more than 4 hours. And it was people mostly speaking in English. One woman spoke in Spanish, needed an interpreter, cried through her testimony in Spanish because she had become an independent truck driver because her boss wouldn't let her take her kid to work when the kid was sick. It was truckers, bakers, musicians, writers, newspaper people. It was these people who would never in a million years probably would think of themselves as having a unifying cause. And suddenly we saw each other in that room and realized, wait a minute, we're all in this together and we all have to stand. It doesn't matter whether you make $30,000 a year or $130,000 a year, whether you're white, black, brown, English speaking, Spanish speaking, whatever it is. All of us stood in agreement and raised our voices together. And ultimately we killed that bill.
So with the AB5 bill, when it first came out, I remember, it was like days, because I remember one of the first things that really noticed to me, because it was all of them. And it didn't shock me. I had to think about it and go, that makes sense. But every anesthesiologist is an independent contractor. And they were immediately like, excuse me, I'm not going to do 10 a year. I'm going to do 1,000 a year. And you're not taking that away from me. And even before AB5 changed or morphed into 2257, and hopefully you can break that down a little bit, but they were just like, okay, before we even get into the write-offs, you're wrote off. There was like doctors, lawyers, some like very specialty niche people that were just written off before they even started the write-outs.
Well, what I have learned
carve-outs.
the carve-outs. What I have learned from my new friends in California, people like Karen Anderson, who runs the Freelancers Against AB5 Facebook group, people like Marissa Selby, Fred Tappel, Alicia Grauso, all these people who created the California Freelancers United that went in and fought, all these folks. What they figured out and taught me is what happened in the beginning was people who had lobbyists and clout got exemptions. And if you broke it down, it was mostly professions dominated by high earning white men. Not exclusively, but mostly. That's what happened, because they either knew somebody who knew a senator, or they were a member of some kind of a professional organization with a high paid lobbyist, and they could go in and get those exemptions. Did you hear something different from that in the beginning?
No, it was like, I have a lot of background in music. So I know a lot of musicians and stuff here in Denver, and I've had them work through my bars. I know every local musician and even like national acts. And I've done production work with some of the biggest. I named Elton John prior. I mean, I did Shania Twain in Europe for months. I mean, I've worked with some really heavy hitters, and I have a real love for musicians. It took a long time for the musicians to get a carve out in California. And that made no sense to me. It's like, guys, they're by definition, a musician plays a lot of gigs. What are you talking about?
I think they coined the term gig work, right? They were the original gig people.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I would say that's the original. That would be probably the first time like I knew the word gig was a band saying we have a gig tonight.
Right. So I'm obviously not a musician, and I wasn't involved with any of that. I know there is a union of certain types of musicians in California, and they did work with Lorena Gonzalez directly to get it written the way they wanted it that would protect just them. But again, that falls into what we were talking about before, is this isn't about actually helping everybody. This is about just very parochial, protecting whatever the unions think is best for the unions. And so what happened was that happened. And then all these different kinds of people started to realize AB5 affected them too, right? I'm sure you've talked about this a million times on your show. And that morphed into this cleanup bill that you just mentioned, where they had to add all kinds of new exemptions. And that noise that happened, that it was in the press, it was people calling their lawmakers, it was just everyday people making noise about how this was wrong. Prop 22 was happening. All of this noise was happening at the same time. Very similar to the kind of noise we made in New Jersey that stopped the bill. What had to happen was lawmakers realizing, wait a minute, this isn't just about Uber drivers. I thought I was signing a bill that was just about Uber drivers. And I thought all the Uber drivers were exploited. What are these people talking? Why is Tim Robbins in the New York Times saying nonprofit theaters are being destroyed? What is going on here? What did we actually do? So it's the noise that matters. And that is the thing I've got to say. It made the difference here in New Jersey. We freelance writers, we're nobody. We're not connected to any, we're just people. We'd never been politically active in our lives, but we know how media works. We knew how to make noise, and we had the benefit of going second. California, I look at as a sneak attack against all of us independent contractors. New Jersey was the second one.
And a wake-up call.
Yeah. What's that phrase that people say? The first ones through the wall always get bloody, right? Always get bloody in any war. We had the benefit of going second. And so we didn't have a lot of time to gear up. We didn't, they were trying to punch it throughout here very, very quickly too, to avoid the noise. But because of what we do for a living, we were able to make enough noise that got people's attention. And I think that going forward, what we're trying to do at Fight for Freelancers USA is help everybody make noise, because we now have writers from all over the country in that group who will, for free, help you write your own op-ed, write your own press release, tell you how to call a senator, figure out who your senator is. We figured out that the noise is what stops the craziness, and it counteracts these kinds of silly narratives that people like Vina Dubal are going around spewing about, oh, it'll be wonderful and roses and you can work whenever you want and life will be beautiful. No.
So part of my interview with Vina, and this is, I think I was discussing this either on the last podcast or with somebody, maybe even off a podcast, I don't remember. But I know her passion is fully there. I know that she is extremely all in with what she believes, but I felt like, and I don't mean this mean to anybody, but I felt like she was distancing herself a little bit from AB5, which was the first time that I felt that way ever. was when I was talking to her, because of some of the questions, she's like, I didn't write it. I didn't, there was just a lot of I didn't, or, and again, it's not mean at her. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what the reality is there, because I mean, as I know it, she was one of the 75 drafters. I mean, even Wikipedia says this. You can look it up. So, I mean, she's one of the 75 people that were brought in to write AB5. But even after it was wrote, more importantly, she was a major catapult player, probably one of the biggest ones to move AB5. So maybe 75 of them wrote it, but it seems like it really went into Vina's hands. I don't know if she was kind of, I don't know if maybe, I know her, again, I know her passion is fully there for, but it's there for so many causes now, way more than it used to be. Even though she's always believed in them, it's not just AB5 on her posts and stuff anymore. It's all these other causes and stuff going on too. So I don't know if she's trying to distance herself a little bit, or if you have any knowledge as to even what I'm talking about here.
I do, but not from her. I can give you the perspective from New Jersey that helps make clear the big picture. This is what we've learned. We've now got Fight for Freelancers groups in well, we work in tandem with some people in California, but we've got New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York. We all go into these meetings with lawmakers, and we all come back together at Fight for Freelancers USA and figure out the talking points and what is happening in this big narrative. What you just described is one of the big picture things going on now. We heard it, I heard it personally from the top aide to a very powerful federal lawmaker from here in New Jersey on a call we did with him on a Zoom. What has happened is they have all watched what happened with AB5, and it is indefensible. It is not what its promoters said would happen. It is not what the people who wrote it said would happen. The result was an uprising of the California people who voted for Prop 22 and a sea of chaos in New Jersey and New York that embarrassed their lawmakers in the press. That's what actually happened. And so they are now saying nobody can defend AB5, but the unions are still pushing it. And now they want it at the federal level because they see who controls everything in DC right now. And they think this is their big chance. They don't want to have to fight it out state by state after watching what has happened the past few years, state by state. They want to try to do it all at once. So that's why you see it now showing up in the PRO Act and in President Biden's very clearly stated agenda on his campaign website. We're going to make California pave the way. We're going to make the ABC test the basis for all labor, employment, and tax law. He ran on it. And I'm sure the AFL-CIO wrote that line. So what you're hearing Dina Dubal say when she's trying to distance herself is the same thing we're hearing lawmakers say when they're trying to distance themselves. They seem to feel like they have to vote for it to keep their campaign money rolling in, because the former head of the AFL-CIO, who recently died, it's in writing. You can Google it. He said, if you vote against this, don't come looking to us for help in your next campaign. We're not giving you a single dollar. We're not knocking on a single door for you. It's over. This is what we want. So they feel beholden to these folks who helped get them elected. They feel like they have to vote for this, but they also have now seen the fallout from AB5, and they have figured out that those of us affected have the ability to make some real noise, including in places like the media. They don't like that. And it gives them great pause. And so you start to see people, I'm sure, like Dina Dubal, starting to distance themselves. Oh, well, I wasn't really that involved. You broke the vase. Which of the Brady kids broke the vase? The vase is broken. We can see it on the floor. We can tell it's broken. One of the Brady kids is getting in trouble.
I guess it's just odd to me, though, because her entire passion is this.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with the idea. I don't think you disagree, and I don't think I disagree. If there is a person who is actually misclassified and is being exploited and is working 60 hours a week on site for a single company and not getting employee benefits and things like workers' comp and unemployment insurance, that is wrong. I feel very passionately about that too. And we should be doing everything we can to stop that from happening, starting by enforcing the laws we have now that aren't being enforced. But AB5, these ABC test laws, they're saying that's what it's about, but that's not what these laws actually did. When this was put into practice in California, the first thing that happened was independent contractors losing their clients and their careers. Nobody can name a single union 2 years later that AB5 created. Nobody can show me a single company that hired a ton of new W-2 employees en masse. It didn't happen. It's a lie. The sales pitch is a lie. So now they have to distance themselves from the sales pitch and keep putting forward these ideas that we're all somehow miserable and exploited, and they're going to try to figure out a way to help us. Also a lie. So yeah, so they're trying to distance themselves now because they see what it actually did. And if you're a person who went around screaming, this is going to make everyone's life better, you have absolutely no evidence to show that that's true. But we have all the evidence.
But Vina isn't in a public office. She's the law professor at UC Hastings. I mean, she's not Lorena Gonzalez, who has to do everything the unions tell her now that she got into bed with them.
But you need the academics to push the legislation and get it going. So like I mentioned, that guy, David Wheel, who coined the term fissured workplace, and Vina then quoted him, and on it went. David Wheel is currently President Biden's nominee to run the Wage and Hour Division of the United States Department of Labor. His confirmation is being held up in the United States Senate because the senators are saying, whoa. This is Mr. AB5 and all kinds of other stuff. We don't want this in the U.S. Department of Labor. No, absolutely not. The true believers, what we have learned online, and Twitter is just a crazy place where you meet so many, just let's call them colorful people I've met on Twitter. One of the biggest proponents, let me go back a step. All of a sudden this group when Fight for Freelancers started getting some juice and making all that media noise, it got to the point where, like, there was a story in CNBC about the AB5 copycat bill, and it quoted I think the three primary people quoted were Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's running for president, Senate President Steve Sweeney here in New Jersey, and me. And this scared the heck out of our opponents, that we were now getting into these kinds of conversations. Because again, their pitches don't work. Their narrative doesn't work if people like us are actually given a chance to respond and talk about our lives. So this group materialized out of nowhere on Twitter, and it was this very badly made, cheap looking website. It was called Freelancers for the PRO Act. It turned out to be an organization created by the Democratic Socialists of America. This is who was running this thing. And when you look at who is in this swirl of who actually wants this and thinks it's great, it's organizations like that who are buying into the things that the Vina Duval types are saying and are retweeting it and pushing it and promoting it. And so it's not that there's no constituency of believers there. It's just that the constituency of believers is this extreme kind of constituency that has a fairly loud voice right now because of what's going on in our national politics. But it's not as if no one agrees with her. There are people who agree with her and think, when I got into it with one of those folks on Twitter, they told me, well, this ABC test in the PRO Act, this is the way we get the Green New Deal. And I said, well, spell that one out for me. I don't understand what you're talking about. And they said, well, if the first thing we do is get as many independent contractors out of the workforce as possible, then the machinery of the corporations can't run unless all the unionized workers agree to do it. So then we can shut down all the factories and the companies in America because it'll be all unionized people now. And we can keep them shut down by going on strike until the lawmakers give us what we really want, which is the Green New Deal. They were completely serious. I thought I was listening to an Austin Powers villain lay out their evil plan, right? With the pinky up against the cheek.
Yeah.
This was their actual thinking. So it's not that there's no constituency of people who believe they're bringing us into this brave, wonderful new world by pushing this kind of stuff. It's that the vast majority of us living here in reality in the year 2021 are going, yeah, you people need to go get some Kool-Aid and sit down and take a moment, just take a breath. That's what's going on.
Are you saying Kool-Aid or Kool-Aid?
They need to cool it. It's just, okay. This is not what most everyday people want. It's just not. I mean, even if you talk to rank and file union members, not the bosses hanging out with the politicians, but the rank and file union members, just in your own neighborhood. And they say, do you think this should happen where you can't have your own business? They say no. They're with us. The rank and file agree with us on this.
Right. Now, when Prop 22 went to vote in November last year, even people I know who are independent contractors in Marin County, let's say, one of my very best friends is a six-figure earner. He owns a computer consulting company. I was telling him about all this because he knew of the podcast. He's like, hey, what was that thing you were telling me about AB5 or something? And he's a very smart person. And this is like a month before the election or before the vote. And he's like, because I just got my thing and I gotta decide this. He's like, I feel like, and he's middle of the road. And he's like, I feel like I'm voting with Uber to say yes on 22 and big corporations. He's like, but I also feel like I have to. I'm like, you do have to. I'm like, unless you want to be some kind of, I don't even know how they deal with you, computer consultant guy, like how the unions would handle you. But unless you want to be under so much control and basically lose your business, you have to. And I think a lot of people were confused. I mean, right now I'm looking at the vote count. I mean, it was, out of 17 million votes, approximately, 10 million of those were yes, that they did want Prop 22, which was a bill that even all of us, or I'm not in California, but everybody in California that I know grinded their teeth while they checked yes.
Well, again,
even though they wanted it, they were like, oh, like they just hated what was behind it.
It's because of the media narrative. It's the media narrative that has been set up, right? That it's the big corporations versus the little guy. Whose side do you want to be on? That's it. That's the choice, right? In reality, we all understand that's not actually what's going on. I mean, there's elements of that going on, but people who choose independent contractor work, we are not Jeff Bezos. I don't know about you. Do you have $1 billion? I don't have even 1 billion.
Not right now.
Not even 1 billion.
Not on
right?
me.
Not on me either. I drive a 2010 Honda CRV and I mow my own lawn. So yeah, not Jeff Bezos. But the narrative that gets set up in the press and that you're going to see again and again and again that we saw out here was we've got to fight these big corporations that are exploiting everybody. And at the end of the day, many of us who are not being allowed into the conversation are going, wait a minute, I'm not being exploited. I'm good. I chose this and I'm happy doing this. So again, I go back to call your lawmakers, let us help you write an op-ed or a letter to the editor, because until our voices become part of that conversation, that narrative is going to persist. We had to bust through that narrative here in New Jersey too. When we told lawmakers that freelance writers and editors can earn over $100,000 a year, they looked at us like we were from Mars. They had never heard of such a thing. How could people like us even exist? It was astonishing to them. So
why are they so surprised my dad was self-employed when I was born in Michigan. He owned, properties, he owned restaurants, he owned all kinds of, he had his hands in all kinds of things. So self-employment's been around forever. Why are they shocked that there's, in this new technical age, there's a new way to do things and it's still just self-employment? Same thing you guys have been dealing with forever.
I can't answer that question. I mean, even right before the pandemic hit was when this was going down in New Jersey. Some of these people didn't even know how to do a Zoom meeting at that point. And we're all like, we've been doing these video calls for, I don't even know how long. This is how people function in our world. And just their complete detachment from the reality of how people can, what you actually can do with a good laptop and a decent cell phone nowadays, that you can actually run an entire business that way from anywhere you want to be. Go sit on a beach. Do whatever you want to do. This was beyond them. They didn't know anyone.
That becomes part of my point. And the issue here with me on this is that I don't understand how you can be in a position to be doing any kind of decision making along this unless you fully understand tech and where it's at. I mean,
But
you really need to have your ability to make laws and everything pulled until you understand what you're ruling against here, because technology is here. And if you're one of those old schoolers who's just like my dad passed away years ago, but you know, he never once, and he was respected in the community. He was a great guy. He had great businesses, but he never once touched a computer. He called him dumb. He passed away in 2012. So he was around through a lot of mainstream computer stuff too. Everybody that worked for him was on computers, and he was buying the computers for them. He did not have one.
didn't like him, didn't get it.
He never even touched one.
Okay, you know what? His brain is probably less scrambled than mine is at this point.
I almost respect him for it, but I got to say, like,
to never have to be on Twitter, think of that. Oh, that would just be fantastic.
He just said, you know, everything can be done in person. This is stupid.
Well, I will say this. Here's what I can say to that about the lawmakers, not your father, but about the lawmakers. To their credit, we met almost 100% of the Republicans we met, and quite a few of the moderate Democrats we sat down with in private where they didn't have to show it in person. Once we talked to them for 5 or 10 minutes, they were with us. They understood what we were saying. They very clearly could see that we were not exploited people being paid $2.50 an hour, and you know, that we understood what we were talking about. And then if they wanted to get into the intricacies of the legislation, we were prepared for that and we could do it articulately. So if you can actually get in the room or get something published that they read or get on a podcast that they listen to or anything like that, call into a radio show. We were doing that too here in New Jersey. Their ears perk up. They start to go, oh, wait a minute, that sounds like my neighbor Joe or Janet or whoever. Yes. You know, instead of having this narrative persist in their heads that it's just these giant evil corporations versus the little guy. That's not a correct narrative. The fissured workplace is not a correct narrative. These are just angles being spun to try to get lawmakers to vote for something that is harmful to the majority of people it will affect.
I agree. And I want to ask something about Lorena Gonzalez. So this might stir you a bit or something. I don't know, but I've been kind of the last few weeks I've been talking about the supply chain a little bit on the podcast.
Who's not, right?
Yeah, I mean, but in California, you can't go to the docks and work them if you're not a union driver. So, you know, you've got 60% of the drivers in California can't even go and help restock the supply chain because they own their own rigs. They're probably some of the hardest workers out there. And I'm not diminishing, I'm sure there's good union truckers too. However, unions have a lot of flexibility to take your time and whatever, you know, but these people aren't even being given a temporary okay, which first of all shouldn't even have to be. Let's say that, you know, I mean, first of all, there shouldn't be an AB5. They should be able to go down there and restock us 2 to 3 times quicker than we will be. Instead of a year out, maybe we could be restocked in 3 months.
Well, right now, technically, my understanding is AB5 is not preventing the owner-operator truckers in California, right? It's
well, I'm
going
hearing mixed on that, so I'm not sure.
What I know on paper. Let's talk about reality versus on paper. I know on paper, the truckers sued immediately after AB5. They were the writers sued, the truckers sued, Uber sued, everybody sued, right?
Right.
The truckers had multiple lawsuits winding their way through all the various courts. And right now, they're at the point where they are petitioning for the United States Supreme Court to hear their case. They won a temporary injunction, meaning AB5 could not be enforced against them. Legally, they could continue to operate. But in order to make that permanent, they have to go win in a big court. And they're still trying to do that. Now, that's on paper, right? If you think about reality, I'm hearing the same thing you're hearing, which is between everybody knowing what's coming with AB5 if the truckers lose in court. And I think it's called the CARB standards about they had to buy new trucks that were more environmentally friendly and this, that, and the other thing involving all the various laws in California. In reality, what's happening is truckers leaving or not being able to go work. That's what I've been hearing too. But I know on paper, AB5 is not technically the problem right now.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. It might come down to the fact of, who knows, it might even be just numbers that they're looking at, like, okay, yeah, it says I can operate, but XYZ means I'm only going to make this. And I'm not going to do that. I used to make this. I mean, I'm not going to do this.
This is the same thing that happens with the writers in California, where Lorena Gonzalez was running around saying, we've got this business to business exemption. And if they satisfy, what was it, like a dozen criteria, some ridiculous list of things, well, then the employer will not be fined for breaking the law. Well, if you're a publisher looking at, why on earth would you take the chance and use a writer in California? Of course you're not going. Even though by the letter of what's on paper, you may technically still be able to work, you're not going to get any work. You're too big of a risk, big of a potential liability.
I think Lisa Rothstein, when I had her on the podcast, said it best. She said, we were talking about this same thing, and maybe it wasn't truckers, but we were talking about the same topic, and she was like, overnight we became toxic to the world.
Exactly right. It's exactly right.
She's like, no, people that I worked with in Florida didn't want to touch me.
It's exactly right.
And it wasn't even the fact of they knew, oh, XYZ are gonna hurt me if I do. It was that they were like, listen, I don't know what'll happen if I work with you.
And it could be very big fines, very, very big fines.
Right. But I mean, this is even, I think, before the fine amounts were established, they were just like in this unknown of, but it was still scary enough. It was like, I don't know. I just know I can't work with you right now.
Well, this is why we're screaming about the PRO Act, right? If you listen to both sides, the Republican lawyers and the Democrats. So there was a Democratic former chairwoman in the National Labor Relations Board came out and said the best case scenario if AB5 passes, it was reported on Yahoo News. She said, this is the Democrat, said the best case scenario is it's going to be years of lawsuits and fighting to try to figure out this stuff. The former Republican chairman of the National Labor Relations Board came out and said, overnight, these people will not be able to maintain the relationships they've had in their businesses for years. Overnight, it'll happen. Now, if you look, the PRO Act is not identical to AB5. There's a whole conversation we can have about that. But the goal of getting the ABC test into federal law through the PRO Act is identical to AB5. It's step one in the three-part plan they've laid out to do it. And so if you think about it that way, if you're a company that hires independent contractors and this bill gets through, it's no different than what's happening in California right now. What these experts are saying at the federal level is exactly what's happening in California right now, where the best case scenario is legal fighting and cleanup bills and all this drama. The worst case scenario is people just stop working and PS, the whole supply chain goes down, not to mention all this other stuff, right? I look at reality. I don't know about anybody else listening right now, but I live in the real world. These people are living in fantasy land.
So I guess my question directly about Lorena, though, becomes, no matter where, I know that she's in San Diego, I know she's an assemblywoman, but no matter where your district, no matter what the major base is around there, how is she keeping this position? I know that she's union baited. I know that she's union sponsored. I know she wanted to be AG of California. She might still, I don't know. That's a scary thought to me.
Me too.
But I know that maybe that was part of the ladder of, hey, we're the unions, we'll get you up to there. However, how is she getting elected? I mean, the supply chain alone it's got everybody uproared. I mean, some of these are starting to become commonalities between crossing party lines. And that's why I don't like getting political, but I need to say this because there are people crossing lines to go, listen, enough with this, with certain things.
Yeah, so I don't know California politics well enough to know how her district is drawn, but the way they make the outlines, the borders of where the different districts are that lawmakers represent, that game, there's been tons of reporting about this for years all over the country. That game is rigged. So there are certain districts that are so entrenched for either Republicans or for Democrats. It doesn't matter really who the candidate is, that person's going to win. Right. But to your point about people on both sides now saying, wait a minute, what the heck is going on at this point? we just had an election here in New Jersey. We're taping this less than a week after the early November election here in New Jersey, where it was widely reported that our governor, who wanted the AB5 copycat bill, was going to win by somewhere between 8 and 12 points. He's going to be lucky if that turns out to be 3. The Mr. Air Quotes, the lead sponsor of the AB5 copycat bill in here, he lost in a shocking upset to a furniture delivery trucker who I think spent like $1,000 on his campaign or something.
I thought it was great.
I thought it was karma. It's karma. I wrote on Facebook, I did this big thread about it, and I told the air quotes story, or on Twitter. I wrote this big thread on Twitter with the air quotes story, and I ended with, people like me trying to talk to you, and you're ignoring us. We may be rough around the edges, but karma's a way bigger bitch that you're up against now. That's what's happening.
I mean, I guess that's my question. So I know that, again, won't get political, that, voting will be coming up in the next year, whatnot. But like, if there was a vote tomorrow, even though all these times she's taken that district, do you honestly believe that even California people would get her back in there?
Sure, I do, especially if her district is drawn in a way that
where
very heavily favors, or very heavily favors Democratic registered voters. Of course, she could still win.
But I'm wondering, that's what I'm wondering, is even the Democrats have to be like, hey.
Well, this is the thing we were talking about in New Jersey, right? I would love to be able to sit here and tell you that it was our issue and us standing up to that guy, Steve Sweeney, that helped to bring him down last Tuesday. I don't think that's true. I think that what we did weakened him a bit in the public eye and in the eyes of his colleagues in the New Jersey state legislature, that he lost one of his signature pieces of legislation, failed because of a bunch of women with laptop computers in sweatpants in their living rooms, took him down. I think all that helped a couple years ago, but our issue, it's not on anybody's front burner. Maybe in California it's different and AB5 is still in the headlines all the time, but this is like, they're still in sneak attack mode. I know that to people like us, we talk about this all the time and we feel like this is very prominent in our lives. I'm sick of this being prominent in my life. I don't know, but I mean, it's enough already. But
however, I have brought light to a lot of people who don't live in California, who in the beginning, when I was doing it, were like, what is this that you're talking about? And now they get it. And when I do something, they do want to know.
But do you think most people are walking into a voting booth and making this connection in their heads? Lorena Gonzalez, AB5. I don't think most people are necessarily walking into a voting booth and thinking that way.
Maybe not AB5, but what's up with the supply chain?
Well, that's what they're saying just hit New Jersey and Virginia, right, in the last election.
I'm just saying, like, now it's like, okay, listen, we backed you blindly, but now we can't have Christmas gifts, or
I do think a lot.
And there's a way to solve that, but you don't want to.
And P.S. My first oil bill of the winter just came and it's out of control, and I'm shopping for Thanksgiving food, and the bill is through the roof, and gas prices are going out insane. All of these, all of these things. Not to mention all the craziness at the school board meetings about how are we going to teach race in the classroom. Like all this stuff is.
Yeah, I have a 15-year-old sophomore in high school, so we are. His school doesn't go like that, and as far as I've ever seen, we don't get political. It's not like that out here. Actually, our board actually listens.
I don't think it was really like that out here, but I know it came up in my school board meetings, became a little rough with that stuff.
I'm sure the media blew certain areas out of proportion, made it look like all of America, though. I mean, pretty much,
I'm like you, right? I'm not a political consultant. I don't have expert polling data in front or any of this kind of stuff. I just know the woo-woo that I sense in the air all around me with my friends who are Democrats, my friends who are Republicans, and my friends who are independents, which is I'm exhausted. This past couple of years has been just epically disastrous on levels I didn't know were possible. I'm so frustrated. I'm so tired. I'm at this point ready to vote for whoever I think is best in a position to make it stop. That's the vibe I sense. That's why I think Virginia and New Jersey went the way that they did. Whether that hits a state like California, I don't know. But again, New Jersey, very true blue. Democrats control everything, and they came extremely close to losing it. And they did lose a lot of their seats in the legislature, including their most powerful guy, Mr. Air Quotes, Steve Sweeney. who was the subject of a nice joke on Saturday Night Live and is now a national punchline. So that's how that worked out for him.
So here's my last question for you, and it might be kind of tough. Um, if you could have 1 hour where the person was going to completely be involved in a conversation with you regarding all of this going on everywhere, whichever piece of it you picked, who would you sit in the room with? Who would you pick that person to be that you would talk with for an hour and that was really going to listen to you, nobody else, no exterior? And what would you say?
You mean to try to stop this ABC test crazy train?
To solve it, to whatever. At this point where we are, jump in.
Today on November 8th, 2021, that person would be President Biden, because he has packed the National Labor Relations Board with union lawyers who are going to use this ABC test. You know, I bet my house on it. He has installed a labor secretary who is a former union organizer, who has tweeted now more than 80 times in support of unions and not once about independent contractors. He has said, I don't even know how many times in his speeches, that he's going to be the most pro-union president in the history of the country. He co-wrote op-eds with the head of the AFL-CIO when he was running for office. And I don't actually think he's a person who intends harm to the rest of us. I think he's a person who grew up in an era when, if you were in a blue collar community, like he always talks about his background.
Yeah, he's from Scranton. He's blue collar.
If you were in the union, your family was doing a little better than the family next door. And so in his mind, this fissured workplace narrative makes sense. We have to get back to what I remember working when I was coming up. And I would like to explain to him why the fissured workplace narrative does not make sense in the year 2021, and that people like me are not exploited, and that I am all for trying to help truly exploited people. And if they want to form unions, more power to them. If they're company employees, go for it, knock yourself out, but stop turning people like us into collateral damage. The tens of millions of independent contractors in this country do not deserve it. And once we understand what you're doing, we are angry about it. And I will not speak for anyone else, but I can tell you that I personally am voting on it now, because nothing else matters to me if I can't pay my mortgage at the end of the day. That's it. That's it. We can fight about all the rest.
You've built a life. You've built a career.
You want to fight about critical race theory, abortion, all the things, the wedge issues, everybody's sure, let's fight about that too. But at the end of the day, I have to be able to pay for the heat this winter. And I cannot do that if you pass these ABC test laws. I'm 49 years old. A, I don't want a full-time job. B, who's going to want me? After 20 years as an independent contractor, I'm like a feral dog in the wild, and they want to turn me into an indoor cat. It's not going to work out well for anybody.
It shouldn't even be like that, though. It shouldn't be like who's going to want me. By the way, I'm the same age. We're both that age. And I mean, I would think that if I needed to, I could go out and get a job. Actually, pretty easy right now.
But would it be the lifestyle you've built?
No, and in fact,
the money that you get.
In fact, this is what I've built, is not having to do this.
Yeah. And I make more money this way. Right. And I only work with people who treat me with respect at this point in my career. I don't have any of the sexist nonsense anymore. And God forbid I do have a bad day with the PTSD. Like I had an incident a couple years ago. I was walking my dogs along one of our park trails, and I came across a guy who had fallen off his bike. He was having a heart attack. And I called 911, and long story short, he died right in front of me, turned blue and died. And that triggered my PTSD. And I had a rough week or two of nightmares and not being able to sleep. And when that happens, I love that I'm my own boss. I love that if I need to sleep in the middle of the afternoon because I had nightmares last night, I can do that and still earn a living. There is no amount of money that I would take to give that up, ever.
Right. And again, it goes back to, when they break down, well, how much are you making hourly and all that? I really can't do that because I work way too much to do it that way. I mean, I do work for myself, and yet I've worked salary positions, like we said. And it's different when you're salary for somebody else and you think that's a good amount of money, and then they find out that they kind of own you in a way. But when it's yourself, it's different. I don't clock in all my hours, because some of them I'm like, I got to type one thing out real quick, and then I'll spend 3 hours doing something. I just
Well, and
find
even those of us who do keep track of what we make an hour, I don't charge by the hour, but let's say I'm charging somebody $1,500 to do a project, whatever number it is. Let's call it $1,500. I will sometimes keep track of how long it takes me to do that work, so that I can make sure I'm setting my project fee high enough. Right. And I can guarantee you there is never a per hour number in my personal spreadsheet that's less than $100. I just won't do the project. That's the way it works. And I'm thankfully good enough at what I do and have made enough connections over the years for what I do that I'm able to achieve that. Why shouldn't I be allowed to do that?
But also, the clocking of hours is a difficult concept, because if I came to you and I'm the Miami Herald, let's say, and I come to you and I say, I want you to write a piece on AB5, you've already put in so much time with AB5 that what you'll put in for that piece does not equate to the time that you put in.
It's true. And in that case, we actually discussed this with one of the lawmakers in New Jersey. I do some writing about the dog business just because I'm interested in the dog. How do we get rescue and purebred dogs into our lives? And what does that supply chain look like? And I did a very big page 1 Sunday print edition story about this for the Washington Post a couple of years ago. And it took a lot of work. And the lawmaker asked me what I got paid. And when I told him, he said, that seems a little low. And I said, but don't you understand? This is the kind of thing that leads to a book deal, that leads to a movie deal. I look at this as something I know a lot about. Yeah, it took me some time to do it. I want to do it. I want that front page byline. And now I'm going to spend a bunch of time and effort turning it into something else. This is how it works. And he understood it. In his profession, they knew what a loss leader was, which is when you put a little deal out in public and say, for whatever, for $1, come on in, and then you hope they buy something for $15 when they're there. Same exact concept. I think that people who just think purely, are you making $15 an hour? They don't understand what we're talking about with any of that kind of stuff. Not even a little bit.
And my reply to them, and I try and never be mean about it, but I'm especially today, this day and age, to the people who say I want $15 an hour and I want healthcare. I'm like, walk out your door, go to the right or the left, walk a block. You'll have a job. You can probably start tonight. $15 an hour in healthcare is not something you can't go out and find today.
Yeah, I don't know what the cost of living is where you live, but where I live, $15 an hour is not going to pay the mortgage either.
I mean, I'm in Denver. We've had half of California move here since all this. And so, I mean, we even have like joking signs about, we don't want you, stay out,
obviously for people who are being exploited, who are being taken advantage of, who are walking around with whatever, $3 an hour at the end of the day, $15 an hour is going to feel like a sea change. And we cannot be, we cannot ignore that is the reality for some people right now in the country. But does the fact that there are cases like that mean we should end all legal independent contractor work in the country and for people in their area of expertise? I just don't see how any reasonable person makes that leap once they understand what these ABC test laws really do.
Well, here's another example for the app-based community anyway, what I get in response a lot of times. So I've kind of stopped asking it because I feel bad when this is where we have to get into it a bit, because they say, well, no, I want the AB5 way where I can stay working for Uber, work when I want, and make $15 an hour in healthcare. And I'm like, that's not a real thing. That's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to get $15 an hour just for being on the app and not accepting calls.
Well, again, I come back to any kind of company. One of the biggest expenses you control is labor, and when people work, how people work, and how much you pay them. Anybody who thinks you're going to maintain your current way of working as an independent contractor if you are turned into an employee, my guess is they've never actually worked as an employee. They just don't understand what it means. That's not what it means. That's not how it goes. And yes, certain employers have moved a little with flex time, as you said when we started talking. That's happened, but there's no place, as you say, in the world where it's just, well, come in whenever you want, do whatever you please. I don't know anyone anywhere who has that job.
So, and I want so I did forget. I have one last question. So I have one last question, and here
you
it
sure
is.
You're not a freelance journalist? Yeah.
This is a very serious question that I was going to ask to Vina when we had our follow-up, but and it's not to make a mockery of anything. I really do want to know, has AB5 created any jobs?
I sure have not seen any reporting that shows that. I've seen a handful of stories about a handful of people who went W-2. I have not seen any story about any company en masse hiring a bunch of people to be W-2 workers. And I've got to tell you, as a person who follows the media narrative on this literally every day, 7 days a week, if those stories existed, they would be in the media, because
Absolutely.
the people pushing these laws would be insisting that they get written. The stories don't exist. There are some extremely pro-labor writers on staff at the Los Angeles Times. They did a glowing profile of Lorena Gonzalez on page 1. They've written about the PRO Act and how great it is, and AB5 and how great it is. If they had examples of companies en masse hiring all the former independent contractors as W-2, those stories would exist, and they don't. Nope. It just doesn't exist unless you're the mayor of Fantasyland and you're writing for that newspaper.
I mean, this is a question I asked Lisa, I asked Gail, I ask a lot of different people, and actually sometimes I get a laugh before the response. Honestly, because and usually they don't even give an answer like you. They're just like, no. Not a single one. And I've
and the follow-up question is the correct follow-up question is, please name a single union that was formed because of AB5. You keep telling us the whole point is good union jobs. Please name a single union. I will wait.
Well, that's even what I've wondered is, is there even union membership growing? Is anything happening to the pro side of AB5 that we should know about? Because I don't see it. I don't see it
either. And I'm looking for it and I don't see it.
And I do too. I try and have both sides on the podcast. I am looking for it. I'm looking to see why people bite at all on this. Anybody.
Yeah.
No, and then now I'm looking for the proof since you passed it.
The only evidence we have of anything is the independent contractors getting hosed. And we can prove that all day long if they'll actually listen. But again, this whole mentality of we don't exist comes into play there. We took a meeting with the the United States Senate sponsor of the PRO Act. We met with her top legislative person on this. And she said, we have seen no evidence of any harm to independent contractors from AB5. Haven't seen any. There's been no problems at all, which we all know is delusional, right? But we said, okay, if we were to send you the proof, would you take a look? Sure, here's my email address. So we all got together through Fight for Freelancers USA, and we all started emailing this legislative aide in the Senate all of the proof of the damage that AB5 has caused, particularly to independent contractors. And the emails didn't go through. And I'm checking the address. Did we get this wrong? Do we have a typo in the email? No, she already knew she wasn't going to be in that job. A few days later, she'd been hired to move over to the White House, to the U.S. Department of Labor, where she is today, in the same department where they're trying to put Mr. Fisher workplace David Wheel. This is the people who are driving the bus on this stuff. Reality is not a factor in their thinking. We are not a factor in their thinking.
But it's going to become one, because, I mean, again, we're not talking political, but all sides, no matter where you sit with your political views, this whole concept is not, I mean, you can't look at this. If you have any understanding of all this, you can't look at this and not see failure.
Completely. And again, this is why we urge everybody, call your lawmakers, tell them who you are, tell them how you, they probably have no idea how you earn a living. If you don't know how to write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, come to our Facebook group at Fight for Freelancers USA. We have nothing but writers. We will help you. We will help you write whatever you want to write so that you sound great in the media. We know how to do this. It worked in New Jersey. We know this playbook because it worked when we raised our voices. So that is our entire message. And I hope that's what people take away from our conversation today is I know that you probably don't have a lot of freelance writers who listen to your show.
I think, I think I've got some more outside of the normal gig economy lately who do listen, because we've had some episodes, I had an episode on trucking,
which is great,
with a trucker who taught us like how to become one and how to skip the, letting a company pay for your school. That you don't need that. That's
so you're trying to do the same thing we're trying to do, which is we're out there trying to say, look, we're onto this now. We see you. We see you're in the same boat we're in. We want you to see us. We want you to make sure that you see us because we think we can bring something to this fight that maybe you can't bring on your own. And we know that it works because it worked in New Jersey. We stopped the bill.
Is this an open group on Facebook, or is this one of the crazy groups where people get kicked out for saying a word? Or
well, I'm one of the admins of the group. Did I sound crazy to you today?
No, not at all. I'm just, no. You know what I mean? You know how Facebook can
What I will say is we are a bipartisan. We have Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And one of our rules of the Fight for Freelancers USA Facebook group is no political bashing. So if you want to write.
So some of the basic stuff, I mean, that makes sense.
If you want to write, how great is it that Steve Sweeney just went down after trying to destroy our lives in New Jersey? Probably nobody's going to stop you. But if you're just going to come on there and do the general political ranting that we see everywhere else, we shut that down immediately. We don't allow it in the comments. And if you
but outside of that, anybody's open to come into the group.
Absolutely. And we have people who are not writers, all kinds of people, musicians, truckers. We have some Uber people, some online teachers. We have graphic artists. We have all kinds of photographers, all you name it. We've got
interpreters.
The translators,
nonprofit opera houses.
Everybody who has figured out that this affects them, there's a couple thousand of us there working together to try and figure out how to raise our voices and to try and make sense of when something pops up in California or something pops up in New York or something pops up in New Jersey. Well, wait a minute, this has got to be part of the bigger plan somehow. Let's try to figure out what's going on so we can speak out against it. It helps to have that kind of, dare I say, organization. The unions would bite their tongue, right? But that's what they have done. They always talk about solidarity. They have created a kind of solidarity I have never seen in my lifetime among independent contractors by attacking us all this way.
Yeah, right. But almost backwards, because it's solidarity amongst ourselves with others who are doing it
against them. Yes, against them. We are united against stopping this madness of the ABC test.
I'm going to put all the links that you want to provide me, your website, the freelancers, the group to Facebook. But is there to end here, is there a couple that, or a single one or a couple that you want to plug that people should go to and get some information?
Well, the main group that I'm a part of is on Facebook, and that's Fight for Freelancers USA. If you just type in Fight for Freelancers.
I was even talking about, because I'm going to put all that in the show notes.
Okay.
But I meant like, even, is there a website to go to that kind of is the overview that you send a lot of people to, that just kind of breaks the generics down without feeling like there's 1,000 links and I don't know where to go on here? And
we built it. I personally built it and we wrote it. And it's called fightforfreelancersusa.com. And it gives an overview of here's what the ABC test is. Here's what the legislation is. Here's what to do. And if you want to learn more, here's a bunch of links, but you don't have to click on them.
Right. I've been to that website and that's what I thought you were going to say. So I was hoping, because I think that one's pretty easy to get on there and say, okay, wait, this is me.
Right. That was our intent. That was our intent.
Well, good job.
Thank you. It helps when you get paid to use words for a living with some of this stuff, right?
Well, Kim, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate that. And I know that, a lot of the listeners really do appreciate it too, because a lot of them have started getting they're starting to hear about it now in other states. Even though I've been talking about it for a while, they're now starting to hear about it. And they're like, is this going to affect me? I'm like, it's going to affect everybody if it doesn't end.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to meeting all my new friends, either on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever they want to come and find us, or on the website where it's like a never end. It's my entire day now when I'm not doing my real work. This is what I'm doing now.
Who knows? Maybe in a month or so, or right after the new year, I can get maybe get the gig worker collective on here, some opposing voices, and just kind of mediate it, because nobody seems to want to sit in the same room and talk.
I'm happy to sit in a room with anybody and talk. And I've been in some of the hostile rooms, and I'm still willing to go back.
I'm just talking. That's what I'm talking about. People just talking, not being hostile. Just let's have a discussion, people, and let's have some questions and have them answered. And then the other side do the same. I mean, let's do that so that people hear this being talked out, because it's easy to go listen to one side and jump on that boat. It's difficult to listen to both sides. I mean,
if you can get Vina Dubal to come on, I would be thrilled to come on, and I will not scream and yell. You have my word. I will speak in this tone, but bring it on. I'm ready. I'm up to speed now. Now I understand what's happening. Let's do this. You want to fight? Okay, let's fight.
Okay, well, hopefully it wouldn't be a fight. I was just looking for more of a discussion where people can listen and understand, and hear the people that they believe in and what they're saying, and then the questions being proposed to them, and go, well, wait, that makes sense. I want an answer to that. As
somebody said to me when we were fighting in New Jersey, we come out of the womb out here knowing how to throw a punch. We don't want to be in a fight with you either. But if you're going to attack our livelihoods, yeah, I'll go toe to toe with you, and I can be polite about it, but I know how to throw a punch, and I'm prepared now to have that conversation. So let's have that conversation.
Again, thank you, Kim, for coming on, and I look forward to having you back when maybe when the time is right, when there's something happening that we need to talk about. So
until then, I'll see you guys on Twitter at the Kim Kavin. I'm there every day. See you there.
Yeah. And again, and I will put all the links in the show notes, guys. I'll put her Twitter handle. I'll put her website. I'll put the Facebook room. As long as she sends all this to me, I'll put it all.
You're not going to vanish and go work for someone else, and your email will stop working. Good. Okay. We're in good shape.
Hi, everybody. So obviously this is a random time of day, and 10:05 a.m. Pacific time, 1:05 p.m. Eastern time. But I was talking to Kim this week, who is here with me today, and there's been 2 complete 180s on independent contractorship in New Jersey this week, and I just wanted to have her on to do. This isn't going to be a long drawn out thing or get into a bunch of topics. I just want to make sure that we're marking the good side of things with media stamps, as well as all the media that's out there about what's going on. So Kim, thank you for taking out a little bit of your day, and thanks for coming on. And can you help us understand what happened starting Monday this week?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week here in New Jersey. I have a little bit of whiplash. So we learned last week, we're in a lame duck session of our legislature here, which means there was an election in November. Some people either lost their seats in the Senate and Assembly, or they're moving to new jobs, or whatever's going on. So you get this like couple of month window after they've been voted out and before the new people come in. And that's called a lame duck session. And the nickname for these lame duck sessions is the silly season. This is when people put forward bills because they have nothing to lose, right? The voters have already given them the boot, or they're moving on to a new job. They can put forward bills that are favors to friends, favors for lobbyists, things that in a regular legislative session that isn't so short and during the holidays, where people were actually paying attention, these kinds of bills would never see the light of day. So last week, it came to our attention that the New Jersey Senate Labor Committee had advanced a bill to protect the legal status of independent contractors statewide, which sounds great, right? That's what we've been asking for ever since they started to try to copy California's AB 5 and destroy our lives a couple years ago. The thing is, this bill that they advanced in the Senate Labor Committee last week would only protect independent contractor status if you're a golf caddy. That's it. All the rest of us, the truckers, the rideshare drivers, the per diem healthcare people, the attorneys, the writers, all of us left out. Just a single bill to exempt golf caddies. So we heard about this, and all of us at Fight for Freelancers were just outraged. It's the same kind of ridiculous favoritism and cronyism that happened in California with AB5, where Lorena Gonzalez would only give exemptions to certain professions, not other professions. It became this nightmare that is still dragging on today, right? So on Monday, this caddies only bill, which I call a bad.
I got to ask too, I know the story, but I think it's a good time to ask this. Did you know that that was going to be the thing when you got there?
When we got to the State House?
Yes. I mean, did you know it was, I mean, were you already aware this is only going to be caddies?
Yes. So we saw this, that this bill existed last week. And because this lame duck session moved so fast, it was put on the hearing calendar for the Assembly Labor Committee just 2 days ago on Monday. So Debbie Abrams Kaplan and I, who are two of the co-founders of Fight for Freelancers, we drove down to the State House and we testified, which they were not expecting. They were expecting to just shove this thing through and have nobody even notice that it was happening. Again, it's Christmas time. It's fast. Nobody's paying attention. Well, we gave them the big what for about how this is an egregious example of playing favorites. It's cronyism. It's wrong. You shouldn't be exempting just a single profession from these lousy anti-independent contractor laws. You should be writing laws that protect us all. And it's such a, in my opinion, stupid bill. I called it the Caddyshack Bushwood Country Club Golf Caddy Protection Act of 2021 on the news last night. We got a bunch of news coverage. People picked it up. It got picked up by our big statewide TV station. It ran in a loop every half an hour last night, all night long. Politico picked it up, some of the statewide papers. It got picked up in New York in a couple of places because it's wrong. It's just wrong. So we came home all outraged. They passed the bill unanimously, which we thought would happen. We didn't think they didn't even ask us a single question. They just wanted us gone. They were angry that we were there and interfering with their plans. And so we woke up the next morning, which was Tuesday.
However, you did get your voices and let it be.
Well, that was our plan. It's we knew we would lose the vote, but we thought we could win the moment was our thought. And we were right. So we woke up the next morning, which is Tuesday, yesterday, and there is all of a sudden a new bill that we had been told to expect. We've been waiting and waiting, and finally it arrived. This is the bill that we want and that every independent contractor in the country wants at the state and the federal levels. This bill would require lawmakers trying to determine who's an independent contractor to consider the IRS test. Whereas AB5 is based on this 1930s ABC test that even legitimate independent contractors can't pass, the IRS test is fair. And it can tell the difference between a misclassified factory worker and a franchise owner. The ABC test can't, but the IRS test can. So the situation we find ourselves in today, this is day 3 of the week, which is a very long week, apparently, here in New Jersey, is lawmakers now actually have the choice that we have been trying to say is the right choice. They can continue down this path that California did too, just playing favorites with lobbyists and cronyism and exempting professions one by one, which is a horrible, horrible way to make laws. Or they can pass the new bill, the IRS test bill, and advance that. And we're getting to work immediately on starting to make some media noise in support of that bill and help those lawmakers any way that we can. And we're happy that they did this. You know, it's about damn time, and we're now going to have to be in this big fight to actually get it through. So we'll see what happens, whether we can do it this session or we got to wait till next session. We're going to find out, but we're getting to work immediately because we're thankful that they finally listened and, in our opinion, are doing the right thing.
So what was it, do you think, that made the flip-flopping between Monday and Tuesday happen?
It's a good question. I know that the IRS test bill has been in the works for a little while. We have been, ever since that ABC test copycat bill from AB5, we were able to stop that in 2019 and early 2020. Ever since then, we've been continuing to push to try to get something like this. And it's not just us. There's other people pushing for this too. But I think lawmakers are starting to just figure out we're right. It's just correct to protect legitimate independent contractors against these horrible assaults on our careers that make absolutely no sense to anybody. So we have lawmakers who are now listening. We're going to try to get more to listen, and we're going to have to spend a lot more time talking to people at the State House again, I think.
So I'm going to put 2 links up in the show notes when we are done with this. But if you see William Anderson, he's a good friend of ours, posted what media. I think he's just asking, first of all, William, if he missed, we're talking about New Jersey State. And maybe he meant what media coverage, or because I think you said it, but where would what media would it be easiest to find on or to look up on? I don't know if it would, you guys. I mean, it might be easier just to take a look at the show notes and click these links and go from there. Because I don't think it's I mean, you can Google search anything you want and find it. But what she has is the actual, like, she sent me the actual recording from the session. I mean, there's some stuff that I don't even know if I'll include in the show notes. I've already seen a bunch of links, but there's 2 that she specifically sent me that I will be putting in there.
Yeah, those include our testimony and our interview in front of the State House. If you want to hear us actually testify, I can send you that link too.
Yeah, I just, well, I already have it. I don't know. I would have to find out that time, how deep you are in when it happens. Because it's not like you can just find that little clip. Yeah,
it was the first bill of the day. So it doesn't take, I think we're in like minute 4 or something like that.
Okay,
but yeah,
okay.
If people
maybe I'll include that too, just in case anybody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I wanted to ask you though was, you also, like, 2 hours, by the way, if any of you don't know, just because we're doing this in the middle of the day, Kim I've already had on, and Kim is just awesome. She she really took on New Jersey, and I did a piece that's up on the channel on YouTube that you can check out, that's Independent Contractors, that is really good, with Kim and I discussing a lot of things. But she does a lot of news, writing things, like taking care of the fight that many of us want to happen, but she's like in the foreground of this fight, like daily, I'm gonna say, pretty much.
We have a good group out here in New Jersey, and we have a great group with Fight for Freelancers USA now, and it's founded by freelance writers. It includes a lot of freelance writers, but we have people from all kinds of independent contractor professions. But the fact that it was founded by people who make media for a living, it gives us a little bit of an advantage in trying to make some noise.
Right. So what I wanted to ask you though is, I think it was like 2 or 3 hours ago today, I saw one of your articles that came out about the PRO Act. And it was saying how the PRO Act is now, what is it, going into Build Back Better?
Yeah, I didn't write
that. It went from trying to be a bill to going into reconciliation and trying to be kicked through the.
Yeah, so what they're doing is, at the federal level, I forget who wrote that story. I just shared the link. But what happened is the PRO Act would take this ABC test from California's AB5 and put it into federal law for the first time. It's step 1 in a 3-part plan, that bill is, that President Biden campaigned on to make this ABC test the basis for all labor, employment, and tax law. The PRO Act is labor law. It's step 1. So they tried to shove that through right after the Democrats took control of Washington after the last big national election. And it has stalled. They made it through the House of Representatives, but the PRO Act has now stalled in the Senate. It needs 3 more Democrats to support it. 2 of them, Senator Mark Warner in Virginia and Senator Mark Kelly in Arizona, have both said that one of the reasons they're withholding their support is they don't want to hurt legitimate independent contractors. So they understand our issue. They're standing up for us, which we are greatly appreciative of. So because that bill is stalled in the Senate, they can't get it through. Their new strategy for the foreseeable future is they're taking parts of the PRO Act out of the bill and shoving it into other bills that they think they can get through. One of which is the Build Back Better bill, which you sometimes see on the news called the reconciliation bill. Mm-hmm. It's something, a good way to describe it is a Christmas tree bill. They're hanging everything. It's like a 2,100 page bill or something. Everything they want to try to shove through, they're going to throw in there. So the ABC test is not, and I repeat, not in that bill, But what is in that bill is a couple of pieces from the PRO Act that would dramatically increase fines that are levied against companies that are found to have violated independent worker misclassification, things like that, fines for unfair labor practices. And it also, I believe, said it includes personal penalties for corporate executives who are found guilty of this. So not just the company would have to pay, but the human beings could be liable for these fines. Now, what's going to happen next with that bill is it has to go through this thing they call the Byrd bath, BYRD. There was a man named Senator Byrd who created this thing. It basically means if you're doing this type of reconciliation bill, and I won't get into all the intricacies of that, but if you're doing this particular kind of bill, the provisions in it all have to be specific to the budget. They cannot be just a wish list of a whole bunch of other stuff that should go through regular committee process and be debated and discussed and have public hearings and all that kind of thing. So what happens next is the Senate parliamentarian will put this bill through this quote unquote Byrd bath and strip out things that don't belong. And the argument that is being made by people on our side is this kind of nonsense doesn't belong in a bill about the budget. So we're hoping these provisions get stripped out. They would not change independent contractor regulations in any way, but they would have a chilling effect. They would scare companies because now there'd be big fines, much bigger fine than usual. So it's not good for us, but it's not the whole kit and caboodle that they're trying to do to us with the ABC test.
No, but it still follows a lot of the design of California AB5.
It's the same mentality. It's the same people pushing for it.
So this review committee or whatever it was,
the Senate parliamentarian. Yeah.
Is that one person or is that a committee?
One person.
So one person gets to decide what gets stripped out of this, what looks legit. Is that overseen by anybody?
You know, it's a good question. I've read a couple stories about it, and you know, it's always a headline, something like the most powerful person you've never heard of in the Senate. I forget the person's name, but they're like the referee, I guess is a good way to look at them. They're supposed to be acting like a referee.
I'm just saying this absolutely can't be just the person does it and says, here, it's done and nobody can look at this. It just is.
Well, I mean, people are going to argue and fight. That's Congress.
Really?
I don't even know how these people make breakfast.
Right. So we have a question from a friend of ours, Roy. It says, Kim, how do you feel about these companies are mistreating independent contractors? He might be referring to it more in the gig economy way, but so that's, half of me, and then the other half is, production work I do. But I mean, you have a good understanding of that. Anything to say on that?
Sure. Hi, Roy. Thanks for the question. Our stance at Fight for Freelancers has always been that we think misclassification is wrong. We think if you are a misclassified employee and a company is cheating you out of overtime, out of workers' comp, out of benefits that you're entitled to, you should file a complaint. You should have them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. You shouldn't put up with it. It's ridiculous. Our problem is with this ABC test that can't tell the difference between those truly misclassified people and legitimate independent contractors. It just loops us all in. And so people who are not being mistreated, people who are thriving as small business owners, are getting hammered and losing their livelihoods from this ABC test. That's our problem. And that's why we think the IRS test approach is better. We just need a fair set of standards that can tell the difference between those two types of people. And we want the bad guys prosecuted. We think they're scumbags just the same as you do. But we don't want innocent people who aren't being harmed to have to endure this kind of nonsense anymore.
And I'll jump in on that too a little bit, Roy, is that like me, I do a lot of production work and this and that and the other. And then I do a lot of gig work. So, I mean, my scenario is, so it's not a negative on the gig world at all. My scenario is I need to be an independent contractor on everything I do, because the pieces just don't come together and allow me to have 6, 7 portals of income under any standards that we're talking about today, AB5, PRO Act, any of these, they all are set to unionize you and make sure you're one job. Here's your one job. Just shut up and do it, and you make X amount. But you're protected by a union that you will pay for. Even if you don't want to have anything to do with it and hate unions, you will have to pay for it, because the PRO Act is going after all 59 million. Yes, 59 million, 1/3 of the American workforce without care. It's trying to take it with one fell swoop and say, you guys are no longer contractors, become a W-2 now. And then the problem in my mind becomes, first of all, we've all chose this path. If you listen to the last time I had Kim on, she even explains how she was doing W-2 in this industry for a long time. And then when she broke off and did her own thing, her life got much better. Not just money, but happiness, flex time, all the things that we want. And for me, like, my life in no way would work. It's not even like, even if I was forced, I don't know how without moving, I would have to move to Florida to where laser production is based out of. If I had to pick any of the gigs I do to take a full-time job, I would have to pick that one. And I would pick that one anyway. I like that one. But I mean, I would have to do that and move to Florida and be an employee there. So I couldn't be an independent contractor in Colorado doing great and making the money I do and raising my son and having the life I want. I would now have to take one single job. I mean,
and most independent contractors agree with you and me. If you look at the studies going back to at least 2015, including ones for the federal government's General Accounting Office, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, big companies like ADP Research, Gallup, MBO Partners, they all say the same thing, which is that 70 to 85% of independent contractors want to remain independent. There was one study came out during 2020, like the worst year any of us have ever even imagined could ever exist. Even in the height of the pandemic and all the worst of the chaos, 60% of independent contractors said there was no amount of money that would get them to take a W-2 job. The vast majority of us want to remain independent. There was just a new study put out last week from the Pew Research Center that said the majority of Americans in general, bipartisan, agree with us that we should be able to remain independent. The only thing that is causing this turmoil is that unions need more members. They need more of us reclassified as employees so they can attempt to unionize us. That's what's driving this. And in my opinion, it's wrong.
It's way wrong. I mean, I think a lot of people in the room here, I know, have seen a lot of my videos up on YouTube, but I'm wondering if they've seen specifically a lot of the ones like if you haven't watched the Gail Gordon one, that one should break your heart and explain to you what they're really looking at doing here and how little they care about anything or anyone. I mean, literally, we're statistical data at this point, nothing more. Because, I mean, as Kim said the last time on here, they don't even care. I mean, like when I brought up, what is everybody going to do for jobs? Because union jobs aren't there. She's like, they don't care.
Yeah, because their goal is their goal is to rebuild the ranks of unions. If they can achieve 10% growth and 90% of independent contractors are gone, they have achieved their goal, right? So we are acceptable collateral damage in their plan. And I can tell you here in New Jersey and also with Fight for Freelancers USA at the federal level, we're doing everything we can to muck up that plan.
Yeah. So like, here's one again from our friend Willie. Yes, I only want laws pertaining to classification, but don't want to be part of a union or an employee. That's what all of us want, Willie.
Amen, Willie. Amen.
And that classification though needs to be very open. Needs to be independent contractor.
Our word is fair. Yeah. If the test can't tell the difference between a misclassified factory worker and a guy who owns a Dunkin' Donuts franchise, it's not a fair test. It's not a reasonable test. So as long as the test is fair, it should allow lawmakers and regulators to just crack down on the bad guys and leave the rest of us alone. And that's the correct way to do things. That's
the way we've done it forever.
It's the way it should be. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you guys got to remember that this IRS test, I mean, even if your state varied a little bit and right to work states and all that kind of thing, but this has all existed. I think that a lot of people get confused because they start hearing about AB5, and if they don't live in California, they don't understand the power of it and the damage it's done. It makes this, like, and I hate to compare it, but it makes this tornado that, hit in Kentucky look like a storm. It wrecked lives. It wrecked it wrecked nonprofits, it wrecked businesses, it wrecked six-figure earners' way of living. It made people leave the state of California. It made companies call people who worked in California as independent contractors toxic, and they didn't want to touch them. They didn't want to work with them. And part of it was, I don't know well, are you sure? I don't know, but I'm not going to take a chance because I've heard some really bad stuff I can't do with you right now. So everybody in California that has built lives and jobs and careers, and I mean, like, I've interviewed a handful of them now. I mean, 30 years of doing stuff, building their brand, and whatever that might be, and working with whoever they work with. And now AB5 is wrecked in. And if you don't know, I'll put the you know what? I probably need to do this anyway. It's been a while. I'm going to put the ABC test into the show notes as well when we're done, because you guys need to see what the B prong is. We're not kidding when we say that, the A and the C, whatever, but the B prong makes it impossible to be an independent contractor. Impossible. I mean, I keep, people keep saying, well, it's not impossible. And I'm now moving to, I don't care if like 0.00001% of something you can prove to me, it's impossible.
It definitely makes it impossible in your area of expertise, because it says that you cannot be in the same line of business as the company paying you, period. So for me, as a freelance writer and editor who does work for newspapers and magazines and websites, I'm in the publishing business, right? I'm disqualified. It doesn't matter if I write for 30 different magazines a year. I'm still no longer considered an independent contractor, which is ridiculous. It's insane.
And you're seeing this too, right? There's another one from Roy.
Yeah. So Roy's asking, so what is the problem if someone hires you as an employee? So here's the problem, Roy. Employees are subject to a lot of different things, first of which is control over your life. And the amount of work that legitimate freelancers do for different publications does not usually constitute a full-time job. At best, we would be reclassified as part-time employees. Our income would drop, our taxes would change, our ability to save for retirement would change. It causes this whole string of problems that you don't have when you're operating as I as a freelance writer and editor since 2005 have been set up as a limited liability company, which provides me some legal protections. It gives me some tax protections. I'm a small business owner at the end of the day, which the majority of small business owners in this country are solopreneurs who don't have any employees. They're people like me. So I don't want to be we had this conversation with one of the legislative offices in Washington. She asked the same question, what's the problem? And we said to her outright, who would want to go from being their own boss with 30 clients, working whenever and however they want to work? Who would want to go to now overnight having 30 part-time bosses? Because that's the best case scenario. You go from being your own boss to having 30 part-time bosses all at once. Is anyone listening want to have 30 part-time bosses? Can you think of a better way to end up in a mental institution? I mean, you'd go insane. It's crazy. So we don't want any part of it. We want to remain independent. We're happy this way. We work well this way. We earn a good living this way. Nobody bothers us. We can work when we want, where we want, how we want. We set our own rates. We make a very good living. We simply want to be left to continue doing that.
Right. And also, I mean, the way, okay, I always look back to AB5, the way AB5 happened. I mean, like now, before the carve outs too, I just always have to remind you guys that, because I don't know if Roy said that's not what I said, laughing out loud. I'm not really sure. I'll have to look at your question again. But the way that everything was handled, if you look back before AB, or even after AB 2257, after AB 5 became AB 2257, and they kept doing carve outs. We were just talking recently about how, even all like musicians were carved out, but not all of them. Classical, yes. Level 2, this, that. I mean, what they did was break apart sections to make them fight amongst themselves and make some of the people abandon the cause and stop pushing for them. I mean, this is 59 million people on the line. This is a third of the workforce.
Yeah, it's the same thing as with the golf caddies. The scenario I just described, where you go from being your own boss to having 30 part-time bosses, that's the best case scenario. What we learned from AB5, as you were saying, is most companies simply eliminate the independent contractors. They don't create any employee position. There is zero evidence that AB5 created any widespread new W-2 jobs, and there's not a single union that has formed as a result of it. What this ABC test does is wipe out independent contractors, and it's wrong.
Right.
And
I mean, we
so now, Roy. Amen, yeah. Roy.
Yeah, because that is what it is, Roy. And honestly, all of this has been done very much, as weird as it is. I mean, it seems like such a big thing that you'd think, no way, but this has all been done as in private as possible. A lot of it gets public, and it's people like all of us talking that get it going. These guys are great. Kim, Karen, Gail, Lisa, all you guys have all your facets too. But I mean, like, this takes constant work to break this stuff down, because the other thing is, once California went to AB5, nobody was hiring. The AB5 was supposed to create jobs through unions. First of all, I don't want that. Nobody wanted that. That's why California voted, no, we don't want this law, and passed Prop 22. And then California said, wait a minute, I know you spent $207 million to make sure that passed, and it didn't represent everybody. It didn't represent all the independent contractors, just the app-based platforms. But still, they waited and said, no, this violates the California Constitution. We're going to take you to court and challenge Prop 22 too. So they look to just throw a net over everybody and go, now you can't be independent contractors. Go get a W-2 with the unions or this, that, the other. I've asked a question to almost every guest I've had on one of these, and I've said, has the unions created any jobs at all? And every one of the guests said no.
Even
or if there is, we don't know where they are. I mean,
even the ones who supported it can't name a single thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's no jobs were created. And then because of it, no hiring was going on either. People who had been working with independent contractors for years were like, I can't hire people. I can't have a payroll. My whole system balances on independent contractors. If you take that away, you lose me. Now I can't employ those people. So it's not like the employment problem was solved. It was like it was, made worse.
Yeah. So as you say, you got to shine a light on it. You absolutely have to make noise, and we did just this week in New Jersey with that silly caddies only exempted. It's just ridiculous. You have to point out the egregiousness of what is going on. We have Roy saying, if a company hires you to do something outside their own workforce, then yes, you're independent. And I'm not going to read the rest. But yeah, so what
if they say you're an employee, that's bullcrap.
If you're a plumber who goes to fix the toilets at a hair salon, you can still pass that B prong. But if you're a writer producing an article for a magazine, you can't. And it's just silly. It's just stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We have somebody in here. What's up, Road Warrior Rick? This isn't just about app-based gig platforms. We're talking about everybody: freelance writers, interpreters, musicians. We're talking about the destruction that AB5 caused, and being an independent contractor by choice, and that being taken away, those freedoms. Like me, I work app-based platforms, but I also work the gig platforms, and so you can't take that independence away from me. So I'm an independent contractor for life, have been for a long time, and I'm not going to give that up. But Kim, thank you for helping us with this. Is there anything else that we should add other than the one I'm going to put in the notes? Because it was like a complete flip. Because when I first heard from you Monday, I was actually a little concerned, even though you were still worked up and you were like
very angry about
on fire. But I was like, because it sounded really bad. Like you went all the way down there and they're just exempting caddies.
It's obnoxious is what it is.
I mean, this is like, this is how AB5 started. Like AB5, you can't be an independent contractor. So Kim went down to the State House this week on Monday and found out that, oh no, we're not doing everybody. We're just doing caddies today. We're just going to exempt the caddies so that they can work. This is what happened with AB5. It was one thing after another, carving it out. Was there money behind them? Could they pay the unions? And what was the union acceptance? There was so much junk behind all. This is what everything bad in politics is about. So
cronyism, plain and simple. Lobbyists and cronyism. It's awful.
Yeah.
But now we have this. But
this is getting ridiculous, and it is going to other states now. I mean, New York has their version. Massachusetts has H1234. New Jersey, you took it down, but here it is creeping back. AB5, Prop 22 is in challenge with the California Supreme Court. Now they're going to spend millions of dollars on that. There is such wasted money going around trying to prove if independent contractors are independent contractors. Yeah, I can just tell you, independent contractors are independent contractors. We've tested this for years.
For decades, really.
Decades.
Since the founding of the nation. So what can people do? What we need help with in New Jersey right now is this new bill that was publicly released yesterday. It's Senate Bill 4262. And this is the one that would make the state use the IRS test. They would make them consider the factors of the IRS test, which is much more fair and much more reasonable. What we need on Senate Bill 4262, if you live in New Jersey, if you know people who live in New Jersey, we need them to call their lawmakers and ask them to co-sponsor 4262, support it, vote it through, protect us all. Don't just protect the guys who carry your golf clubs, for Pete's sake. And
don't just pick them and then the next thing and then the next thing. And then, because that's what happened in California, and not many people knew how that looked. It was so ugly. If you guys weren't around and watching it in the very beginning of AB5, it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. I mean, it was just like every 3 days, there'd be like 2 more things exempt. Oh, now we're going to let these people and these people work during a global pandemic. I mean, that part shouldn't even matter, but it was happening. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's one of those times I'm going to say that comment that I don't like too much because everybody says it, but you can't make this stuff up. It's offensive. And as you said, it's the worst of what government looks like. And it's not how things should be. And we just need to keep pushing for how things should be to protect us all. I'll end with Roy's comment because I think that's right. Because you made a joke about Trump's golf course being close to your house, Kim. It is. I don't have any idea if that's one of the ones that lobbied for this, but yeah, I think that the lawmakers in Trenton, there was a lot of white men in the room yesterday. I'll say that. They probably play a lot of golf. Okay, well, thank you very much for doing, because this, I think you got it too, Kim. I just wanted this to be out there because here's all the news out there on the other side saying, oh, this is great, even on Monday. And then Tuesday, there's a complete flip. They don't want to talk about that yet. So I just want there to be stamps and markings in the media world, YouTube, things like that, that show, hey, there's another side to this story. Well, and it shows we can get there. Right. We've been working on this for 2 years now. I can't tell you how much of my life I have lost to this stupidity, but it can be done. We now have a bill introduced that would fix it. Now there's going to be a fight to get that bill passed, but people who think it doesn't matter, you can't fight City Hall, just suck it up and let them destroy your life. Hell no, that's not how I roll. Come and help us at Fight for Freelancers USA. Right. Don't let it anywhere. That's just one of the stepping stones to, taking away all of our autonomy in life. And I'm not even going to get into the other ways they're taking away our autonomy in life already right now.
They can't have it. We won't give it. And what we proved yet again, just this week, by showing up and saying our piece on that caddies only bill, the media will cover it if you show up and speak out. You just got to find a little courage. And, when we do it together, we have strength in numbers, and we can move the ball. We're moving that ball. Be the ball, Steve. Be the ball.
Okay, I will be the ball. But hey, there is one more comment that we need to look at. Hey, luckily these laws will never come to Tennessee. Nathan, that's what we're saying. They will come to Tennessee. The PRO Act is aimed at Tennessee. And if you're a right to work state, it doesn't matter. That's what the PRO Act is. It's going to take away the right to work state. It's going to take away all of them. And everybody the entire country will go under the PRO Act. Look into it. It's against every state.
You got to look at it as strategy, Nathan. What they thought was going to happen was they'd get it passed in a couple of the states, and then they would do it at the federal level. It doesn't matter if you're a red state like Tennessee. What their plan was, starting in 2019, first California, led by a big blue state, California would pass it. New Jersey, another blue state, was supposed to go next. New York was supposed to go after us, and then Illinois was teed up to come after that. All states that are controlled fully by Democrats, they would have got it through. And then the plan was to be able to say, okay, this is the way things are going in the states. Now let's do the PRO Act at the federal level. What actually happened was California was a disaster. We screamed and yelled in New Jersey and stopped it. New York and Illinois backed off. So we proved that it can't be done at the state level, which is why when the Democrats took control of everything in Washington at the federal level, they said, well, forget about the states. Let's not have the fight in the states. Let's just do it blanket across the country for everybody. So they are trying to do it specifically to red states, starting with the PRO Act. And that's why we're fighting it. Nobody should be subjected to this. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous.
It is. It is. And it's just the way none of us, this should be my final thought here, and then Kim will have one. But honestly, this shouldn't shock anybody. This is the way the country's going. And I'm not putting out a political statement or anything right now. What I'm just saying is, we're moving to a woke climate where, we're going to be told what vaccines and when and where, and you're going to do this, and you're going to be here, and you're going to work for a union, and you're going to live here, and you might think that's very extreme of me to say, but that's the goal in a lot of people's heads.
Yeah, I'll say my final thought on that is, as we've talked to lawmakers at the state level here in New Jersey, we have had good luck and bad luck with Republicans and Democrats alike. There are very reasonable people on both sides if you go find them. And in order to get the right thing done, you need help from both at the end of the day. You just do. And so our approach is to try to get people to see what I think of as the rational middle. It's just the rational middle ground. Have a test that can let you crack down on the bad guys, but leave all the rest of us alone. It's reasonable. It's logical. Let's do that. And there are Democrats who helped us in 2019 and who I believe are going to help us now with New Jersey Senate Bill 4262. You just got to go and make some friends and show them who you are and explain, they're hearing from the lobbyists on the other side. The lobbyists who want this, those unions have a lot of money for lobbying, and they know these lawmakers. They got their cell phone numbers. They're possibly playing golf together is my guess here in New Jersey right now. So they need to see our faces. They need to know who their constituents are and understand what independent contractors do. They don't understand it. And once they meet you and understand that you're not some exploited person who's miserable and downtrodden, then they don't want to hurt you. And once you show that you're willing to take your story public, then they really don't want to hurt you because they don't like bad press. So this is a strategy that we continue to employ, and look at what we have gotten to so far. We stopped the bad bill. We've got the new good bill introduced. I don't know what'll happen with the idiot caddy thing, but life will go on, but we're going to work very hard now to try to get this IRS test bill through. And we're going to work with Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike. That's what our Fight for Freelancers group is. We're nonpartisan for a reason. There is bipartisan agreement that our position is the right one. We got studies to back it up. We just need the lawmakers to do the right thing.
Yep. Perfect. Perfect. I mean, that's it, guys. That's all we wanted to bring to you today. I just wanted to do this update because I had Karen on, and then I said that's probably going to be it for the year. And then in early February, we're doing a roundtable piece that I think you guys will all be interested in. It's going to have Kim, it's going to have Lisa Rothstein, Gail Gordon, and Karen Anderson. And that will be quite a roundtable. But until then, I just wanted to point this out because this just happened, and it just happened around the holidays. And I had that AB5 feeling in me again. I don't know, just like, creepy. Not even like, oh, this passed, but like creepy. I don't know. So I'm glad that you were there. I'm glad that I'm glad the caddies got their way, but nobody else did.
Like I said, sometimes you lose the vote, but you can use the media to win the day. And that was our goal, and we hit the target, bullseye. So
right. So for right now, if you want to be an independent contractor in New Jersey, you can go be a caddy.
Forever. You're legally
you can be a caddy
forever.
I mean, hopefully other jobs will fall into that too.
Yeah.
But with good people like us, it will. Thank you, Kim.
Thank
you, everybody, for checking us out, and see you soon.
Happy holidays.
Hi, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a afternoon edition of Rideshare Rodeo Live. I am so excited to have Kavin with us here today. And it's been a minute since we've had Kim. So Kim, welcome back to the show.
Great to see you, Steve. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. I'm hoping that today we can get a little bit of understanding of what's going on. And I know that I say that very lighthearted because I know that even just before we came on, everything's a question mark over it right now. Like you and I were kind of going, I don't know, like to some things, like it's not cemented enough for me to understand. So I think that what we were talking about before we started is a good idea. I think that maybe you could walk us through a little bit of the history and maybe bring us up to speed here with that before we get into what this new rule change and the new definition for the six prongs now, I guess. The 6-prong test. I don't know.
Right? They've been coming at us with so many things from so many angles for so many years now. It's a little hard, right? So maybe just a quick recap, right?
But before Kim starts, let me introduce who Kim is. So Kim is a author. She also writes for newspapers. She's the co-founder of freelancers for, I already messed it up. Fight for Freelancers. Fightforfreelancers.org. And she's editor. I mean, she's been around the block, but she's also she didn't include this in her when we were talking, but I needed to add this because she's a big fighter of our rights. I mean, Kim's she's like that first person in line to get down there, because we were joking about the caddies. Like nobody really had a radar on that, but you were down there fighting, literally fighting.
Me and Debbie Kaplan, another one of the co-founders of Fight for Freelancers. Yeah, well, our group was we founded it in 2019, when I know that the listeners of your show are very familiar with California's Assembly Bill 5 law.
Yes.
That's kind of when we came to be in New Jersey. So, and that's a good place to start, actually, our conversation. So what's happening today is an outgrowth of what started in 2019 in California, where you had that Assembly Bill 5 get pushed through into law. And it was based on this language called the ABC test, which I know you've talked a lot about on your show. It's a 3-factor test, ABC, and they changed it in a way that made it almost impossible for anybody to pass the B prong in particular, that said, if you're in the same line of business as whoever's hiring you, you can no longer be an independent contractor. You have to be an employee. And the stated goal by the people who passed it, every article that came out about it, it was all that we're going to make all these freelancers, independent contractors, consultants, they're all going to become employees now, and then they can be in unions and their lives will be better. That was the goal. It was a bill intended to help unions with their historically low membership numbers. And that was the promise. And as we all know, because I know you've talked about it on the show, not what actually happened. What actually happened in California with that anti-independent contractor law was independent contractors just losing money and losing clients, and in some cases losing careers. And it happened to all kinds of people: financial advisors, court reporters, graphic designers, translators, interpreters. You all saw very in depth, I know you've talked about the battle against Uber and Lyft that the state tried with AB5. It was mad.
Non-profits.
Yeah. Oh, it was so many professions that less than a year later, the state of California had to go back and pass an emergency measure. They ultimately exempted, at least partially, more than 100 professions from this ABC test. And as I know your listeners are all well aware, right after that, Prop 22 came through, and the voters, by a margin of just about 60-40, said, yeah, we're going to exempt those folks too, the rideshare drivers. And this is all stupid, and stop what you're doing, lawmakers. Nobody wants this. Nobody thinks this is a good idea. Horrible. So that happened in California. Right after that ABC test law went through in California, kind of around the rest of the country, we were looking at it and going, wow, those crazy Californians, what are they doing out there? I don't understand. Sucks to be them. Glad I don't live there. This is weird. But immediately after that ABC test law went through in California, there were copycat bills introduced in other blue states, including my state, New Jersey. There was another one introduced in New York, and all of a sudden you started seeing in the press in Illinois, they were going to introduce one there. And it very quickly became clear that the California ABC test bill was supposed to be the start of a national rollout of this policy that was going to be the biggest reclassification of independent contractors and employees pretty much in history of the country. They wanted to reshape the workforce. And so what you saw happen, because of all the problems in California, you saw people like us kind of started being real big mouths in the press and whatnot out in New Jersey. That scared the New Jersey lawmakers enough that they couldn't get that copycat bill through. The lawmakers in New York saw what was happening in California. They saw everybody screaming in New Jersey. They said, well, maybe we'll think about this a little longer. And they pulled back on what they were doing. Illinois saw what was happening and said, yeah, I don't even think we're going to introduce the bill right now. It all just kind of, everybody retreated to their corner and was like staring over the fence at each other, like what's going to happen next? At which point, this same ABC test from California all of a sudden showed up in a federal bill called the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act. It was placed right on page 1. And the PRO Act, it's a version of what they did in California. It would only affect one area of federal law, but it's kind of like in a war. First, you got to take the beach, and then you can move your troops inland and get more land. They're trying to find a way to take the beach. They first thought they could take the beach by going state by state and getting it through. That was how they were going to get their foothold so they could advance their plan. When that failed, they decided to try with this federal bill. And what happened with the federal bill, it passed the U.S. House and then didn't go anywhere, because at the time Donald Trump was the president and he said, yeah, I'm not passing this. There was no chance of it going. But very soon after that, we had the elections in 2020. And as we all know, the Democrats took control of the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the White House. So now all of a sudden they could get it through if they wanted to. And they immediately passed it again, almost immediately, in the U.S. House. It went to the U.S. Senate, where 3 moderate Democrats stood up and said no. They said, we saw what happened in California. 2 of them went on the record. Senator Mark Warner in Virginia and Senator Mark Kelly in Arizona went on the record and said, we don't like this part about the independent contractors. We're seeing what happened in California. People don't like this. People don't want this. It's not working out. So they couldn't get the people who want this, who want to reclassify huge swaths of independent contractors as employees. Now they've failed at the legislative level in most of the states. They've tried. Now they're blocked in the legislative branch of government at the federal level too.
That gets us to where we are now, because now they're trying to find other ways to get to make happen what they want to happen. So with the legislative path blocked, they're moving to the executive branch of government, right? You got 3 branches of government, right? You got the courts, you got the legislatures, and you've got the executive branch. Executive branch at the federal level, that's the White House and all the agencies they control, like the Treasury Department, the Commerce Department, the Defense Department. In this case, what's happening now is with the Labor Department. They're going to try to do a bit of an end run to get as close as they can to what they really wanted through some rulemaking at the Labor Department. Are you with me so far?
Yeah, I am. Is everybody else with us so far?
It's a lot, right? So
there's more to take. There's more to swallow here, guys. So stay tuned.
So you got to first understand who is actually doing this in the Labor Department. What happened when President Biden came in was he, like most presidents do, started filling these departments with people he wanted in the leadership so he could get the policies he wanted through. In the Labor Department, he installed Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, who before he became a public official was a union organizer. Under Marty Walsh, he brought in Julie Sue, a name people might recognize in California because she was a public official there who was involved with AB5 and telling Uber and Lyft drivers to apply for unemployment to see if they were misclassified and that kind of thing. Under her, they brought in a woman named Nikki McKinney into the Labor Department. Nikki McKinney was the one, prior to that, if you had scheduled a meeting to talk with the senator who was the primary sponsor of the PRO Act in the United States Senate, Nikki McKinney is the one you got the meeting with. She was the one writing the ABC test into page 1 of the bill. She's the one we did a phone meeting with where we explained to her that our best case scenario with that ABC test was we went from having a business with 30 or 35 clients to overnight having 30 or 35 part-time bosses, which to normal people sounds crazy, but she said, yeah, I see no problem with that. So this is the people now in the Labor Department who are going to try to advance this cause. They're still trying to take the beach, right, in the battle. And now they're going to try to do it with rulemaking. So these people came in to the Labor Department, and the first thing they did was try to get rid of the existing rule that the Labor Department uses to determine who's an employee and who's an independent contractor. And you have to understand where that rule came from. It's weird, but up until the Trump administration, there wasn't actually a rule in place at the U.S. Labor Department to determine independent contractor versus employee. They kind of looked at what the courts were doing and went with that. But when the Labor Secretary under President Trump, his name was Eugene Scalia. He's the son of Supreme Court Justice Scalia. When Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia saw what was going on with AB5 and everything in the states, and he said, well, we're going to make an actual rule. The Obama administration before that had done like a big, long guidance note where they said, yeah, we're going to try to crack down on some of this misclassification and people who should really be employees. But the Trump administration, Labor Department, they came in and said, no, we're going to make an actual rule. And so at the end of the Trump administration, the Labor Department actually implemented a rule that legitimate independent contractors can pass. It's not like AB5. And in fact, when he implemented it, Secretary Scalia wrote, we see what's happening with AB5, and we don't want to broadly redefine who independent contractors are. We think that's wrong. We want to just have a test that is reasonable and that legitimate freelancers and independent contractors can pass. So that was what was in place when Joe Biden started restacking the Labor Department with all these folks who really very much wanted the ABC test. All that makes sense so far? Good. Keep going. Okay. I see you saying yes. I can't hear you, but okay. I think you're muted maybe. So
I was muting to make sure that you were heard, but yes,
You're with
following
me.
as long as I don't see anything in the chat saying that anybody else is confused. So far, so good though.
We're good. Okay. So now you've got these folks in the Labor Department. The first thing they try to do is get rid of the rule that the Trump administration had put in. And their first try didn't go so well. The courts slapped them and basically said, you did this wrong. You didn't follow the rules you're supposed to follow when you change a rule like this. And so you have to go back to the Trump rule. So that was their first try. And now we're on their second try. So they just recently dropped, they announced, okay, well, we're just going to make a new rule. They've been going through the process of doing this. They started by doing public hearings over the summer. They were done on Zoom. Right from the get-go, they announced 2 public hearings, one for employers and one for workers. They did not announce one for actual independent contractors. So right out of the gate, you understand who these people are and where they're coming from. Those public hearings were so overrun by actual independent contractors screaming no that they had to break them into multiple meetings sometimes, and still people were waiting to talk and didn't get a chance to talk. You know, the ratio was like, I don't know, 10 independent contractors for every one person who wanted to do this, maybe not even that many. It was just a deluge of angry independent contractors in those public hearings. They failed to record those public hearings. So in one of the hearings, they told people who were participating that they couldn't record them either. The whole thing was all just very clearly meant to be a puppet theater show. The next thing that happened was they did invitation-only meetings to discuss how they were going to write the rule. And it does become a matter of public information who they held those meetings with. Again, independent contractors nowhere at the table to be found. They had a couple meetings with some representatives from like the financial services industry, the construction industry, like more higher level association kind of people. And then they had a bunch of meetings with people like, there was one whole meeting for union organizers trying to organize rideshare drivers. There was one whole meeting held for the National Employment Law Project people. That is a think tank that is union funded, and the president of its board of directors is the head of the AFL-CIO. So you can see who's writing this rule and what it's all the same people now just moving over into the Labor Department who'd been trying to do this through legislation. What they eventually dropped was a 184-page monstrosity of a proposed rule, which I do not recommend anyone read unless you have insomnia or you are interested in like becoming an alcoholic, because you just can't even, it breaks your brain going through it. But I have read through it. And what they did was they said one thing and then they did another thing. What they said is, we can't do the ABC. We love the ABC test. We think the ABC test is great, but we don't think we can do that without an act of Congress or a ruling by the US Supreme Court. We think it would exceed our authority to do that. And they are correct in my opinion. So that was a relief that they didn't try to overshoot it that way. But what they said they're going to do is, we're just going to go back to the way things were in the Obama administration. And we're going to use this 6-factor test, which unlike ABC, where you fail one prong, you're done, you're an employee. We're going to give you 6 factors in a test, and you can pass some and fail some, and we're going to look at everything and figure it out. But what they did was they also added in explanations of how they plan to interpret each of the 6 factors. And it's in those interpretations that you hear all the lawyers and experts saying, well, hang on a minute, these have never been used this way before. It's kind of like if you had someone saying, okay, we're going to play a game with a baseball bat, and you're expecting them to swing the bat at the ball, and they instead start swinging it at people's heads. They're using the factors. They're saying they're going to interpret the factors in ways that are not historically the way they have been interpreted. And we can go one by one through these and talk about it. But at the end of the day, they're saying they're going to interpret these 6 factors in ways that this can misclassify legitimate independent contractors as employees. It's kind of like having a crooked umpire calling balls and strikes behind the plate. And because of who they are, you can see why that happened, right? They're trying to get as close as they can get to that California ABC test in a way that they think they will be able to survive what's inevitably going to be a giant battle in the courts.
Yeah. To me, it almost feels like a placeholder. Like it's almost like the ABC test and how AB5 became AB2257, and they had to do all these other carve outs to get the group smaller, and who else can we whittle down? I feel like this is like the big net thrown out, and it's like, well, we'll just figure it out after the fact.
They definitely are no carve outs for sure in what they're doing here. And they
Right.
definitely know they're going to get sued. So how many people will sue them, I don't know, but it's going to be more than one is.
So when I was looking at the process of a rule change, though, it normally takes a year or two, right?
Well, by law, what we're in now is the public comment phase.
The 45 days.
So they have to accept public comments. If you go to federalregister.gov and you type in independent contractor, it's the first one that comes up. You click on it, you click through, you can file a public comment that says I'm for this or against this. That process has been completely overrun by spam and bots at this point. I counted the other day, one guy had submitted 10 comments, like a bot had submitted 10 comments in one guy's name. Like, it's a completely out of control spam fest where prior to that happening, there was about 2,100 comments. Most of them, the vast majority of them were people like us saying, hey, stop what you're doing. It was financial advisors, court reporters. I saw a few gig drivers in there, just people saying, stop, this is not okay with us. And then all of a sudden, one day, it just started to get overrun with this spam. And it's like it's operating on a loop where it's dumping 1,000 comments a day into the system. So we're now in that public comment phase. That will go on until they just extended it into December. It was supposed to end right after Thanksgiving. Now it's going to go on until December. And once that's over, by law, they have to read the comments. Now, I assume from what lawyers have explained to me, they're going to just throw away all the spammy stuff that there's, 7,000 of the same comment being just dumped into the system. So what we're encouraging people to do is write real comments and explain how this would actually affect them, because those they actually have to read and respond to. And it goes into the public record, and that all becomes fodder that can be used later in lawsuits. So it's important to participate in that process, even though these people are not on our team. They're going to do everything in their power to try to reclassify as many of us as they can. You want to give them a good fight, because you just might win, as we saw in the states and in the PRO Act, right?
Right.
So after they do that, they have to give their response, and then they can implement the rule. Everything I've been told, everything I've seen is that is most likely to happen in the spring or summer of 2023. At which point they are immediately going to get sued. People have publicly said they're going to sue them. I know from private conversations, there's going to be multiple lawsuits filed against the U.S. Labor Department. Probably what happens at that point is at least one judge ties this thing up, puts a stay of some kind on it, and then lawyers fight for like a year or so. And then we see how it all shakes out on the other end.
Yeah. This
good
is
times, huh? Good times.
Yeah, I mean, it's just baffling to me, because again, everybody's looking at AB5, and like you mentioned, a couple Democrats even said, "Hey, we're not for this. We don't believe in this. This isn't good." So I know that right now, even this rule change there seems to be a little more target on the back of the gig worker. So I know that there's a lot we need to talk about, but do you agree with that? Do you agree that this is partially going after the gig worker to knock them right off there? Because I got to say, like, after the Uber call yesterday, or the Q3 call, I really am not that I know that they can play well, but I'm not that sold that they seem that concerned.
It's funny. I saw Dara, the
Yeah.
head of Uber, on, I think it was CNBC the other day, right before that call. That guy's good at his job, man. His job is to keep everybody calm and keep the stock price up, and he's great at it. He very calmly said, we think we can handle this. We think this will be okay. And by the way, just as an aside, we're simultaneously going state to state and getting Prop 22 in place everywhere. And if I didn't understand these issues, I wouldn't have realized watching that those are two completely different things, you know,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and so clearly they are ready to fight, and they are confident that they have a winning way to do it. It sounds, or he's projecting that they have a winning way to do it. But there's no doubt we're going to get to a line in this, and you're going to go, well, wait a minute, they're coming right at Uber and Lyft with this thing. With one of the things we're going to talk about with the 6 factors.
And with and the other gig platforms too, very much. The food platforms as well, very much.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And yeah, so I mean, let's look at that.
Let's talk about these 6 factors, because these are confusing.
Right. So the first factor, they say they're going to look at the person's opportunity for profit or loss depending on managerial skill. They're saying additional considerations will include things like whether the worker accepts or declines jobs, which sounds good until you get to the part where they say, as we interpret this, we've decided that the decision to work more hours or take more jobs does not reflect the exercise of managerial skill, indicating independent contractor status. So in one part, they're saying, we're going to look at whether they accept or decline jobs as a way to determine if they have any managerial skill. And then they say, but we don't think that the ability to accept or decline jobs has anything to do with managerial skill. So right out of the gate, we've got them saying one thing, interpreting it another way, and how can you possibly comply? They're giving themselves a way to find you to be an employee no matter what, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's seems to be the case with all of this every step of the way.
Every step of the way.
So
that's problem number 1. Then you get into number 2. This is the one that I think your audience is going to care the most about. They say they're going to look at the investments made by the worker and the employer. So according to what the DOL is saying, the person they're looking at to determine if they're an independent contractor must have invested in a way that make it clear that they're doing something entrepreneurial in nature. But then they say, and this is key for your listeners, they say the use of a personal vehicle or a vehicle leased by a worker to perform work will generally not indicate that you're an independent contractor. So you could lease a whole car to drive just for one of these rideshare companies because you want to do it as a business, and they're saying, yeah, that doesn't count.
Right. Or delivery too. I got to keep saying that because there's a lot of people in the delivery space right now.
All of that.
Yeah.
They're also saying under that second factor that the investment the person made, like let's say you spent $30,000 on that car, that's going to be considered on a relative basis with the employer's investments in overall business. So they're going to look at how much you spent, and then they're going to look at how much Grubhub spends to run its business. And they're going to decide if you're really a real business based on that. How can anyone pass that test?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't.
It's set up. It sounds like the B prong again, or another B prong.
We haven't even gotten to that one yet.
Yeah, I know. And that's, I don't know. I'm confused by what this test even means because of the fact that when we get through it, there's still more that could be added. They don't even identify what that is.
Right. So that's where they're specifically showing, they're showing their cards that they're coming after the folks who are the majority of your audience on the show. Number 3 out of 6. They're going to look at the degree of permanence of the work relationship. If you are under a contract that is routinely or automatically renewed, that indicates employee status. And even if you have the ability to work for others, that doesn't necessarily make you an independent contractor. Now, I can tell you, for somebody like me, I'm a freelance writer and editor. The way you build a business is with repeat clients.
Yes.
You write a great story. The magazine's happy. You're happy. They paid you well. They say, hey, you want to write another story? You say, great. Eventually they say, hey, you want to write a monthly column? You say, great. And you have like 10 of those. Well, now you got a nice little business going, right?
Yeah.
Under this number 3, none of that counts. In fact, it weighs in favor of you being an employee because you're spending 1 day a month writing that same column for that same client, which to me is insane. You're making it impossible to even have a business. They're also saying under that number 3, they appear to be saying under that number 3, that even if it's just seasonal or temporary work that's being done, that does not necessarily make you an independent contractor. So if you're, in a landscaping company and you only pull work over the summers or something like that, still not good enough. Even if you've now bought all your own tools, you're picking up hours with 6 different landscaping companies, you're only doing it for the summer when you're not in college, still maybe not good enough to be an independent contractor.
So I'm looking at, Ron, Jerry Courier, I'm sure, from Twitter.
I do.
Yeah. So he
Not
lives here in
person,
Denver.
but I know him from Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually know him in person. He lives here in Denver. So we've golfed. He's a friend of mine. So good guy. But he's saying that they put language in there about LLCs. Yeah.
Which is what we've been saying all along, because the lawmakers have been telling us at the legislative branch too, LLC doesn't matter. Basically anything you can do to try to establish a business doesn't matter, is what they're saying.
Karen Anderson is in here today, and I saw, she was, I think if I'm remembering right, she was an S corp, or is an S corp, and that didn't exempt her from AB5 either.
I don't know if she was an S corp, but I know of at least one other person in California who was, and it didn't save them. Their clients dumped them.
She says S corp doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, none of this matters. Because again, look at who is doing the rulemaking. This is people whose intent is to reclassify us.
Right.
So that brings us to number 4. Number 4, they're going to look at the nature and degree of the business's control over the worker. So facts relevant to that control would be things like setting the person's schedule, supervising how they do the work, if the employer is setting the rates, if the employer is limiting the person's ability to work for others. And what they're adding to that has not been happening in the past is they're saying, if there is control implemented by the employer for purposes of complying with legal obligations, safety standards, or contractual or customer service standards, they are now going to say that also may indicate control. And that hasn't happened in the past, based on what all the experts and attorneys are saying. So if you look at something like the trucking industry, where you're going to have safety standards for over-the-road hauling of certain kinds of things, well, you're not affecting how the people are driving, when the people are driving, what loads the people are taking. But now they're going to say, well, if you tell them you got to have certain safety gear in your truck to comply with the law, that's not okay. I think about this in freelance writing, where I routinely sign contracts that say, I hereby promise I will not steal anyone else's copyrighted words. I will write my own words. That has nothing to do with how or when or what I'm writing, but it could now be considered a factor of control, just because we're saying we don't want you to violate copyright law, which to me sounds absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy, and I just clearly they don't, on all levels, they just don't want ICs. I think that am I saying this right, that they're probably not going to get everybody in this first phase, like how you were using the analogy of the beach. They're not going to get everybody they wanted to get, but they're going to get a decent amount of people here.
Well, they're going to set a precedent for federal language being used to determine independent contractor status. That's their goal. If they can get a precedent in one area of law, you can then spread it like a cancer into other areas of law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you see Karen's comment here too, important about the truckers, Kim, safety language is directed at them for sure.
I see a lot of trucking industry people yelling about that online.
Yeah, we have Tom Kelly in here in the chat too, who runs pretty much a truckers radio network out of Houston. And so I do a show with him on Friday nights, and we'll be talking about this week for sure. I'm sure this specific piece too, because these are a lot of his people don't, they're independent.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a rabbit hole you can go down in the trucking industry for days. And same with the financial advisors, same with the interpreters, same with the freelance writers, same with every profession that is affected, hundreds of professions that are affected by this. You could do entire shows about each profession. This kind of one size fits all attempts, I call it freelance busting. You know how they talk about union busting? I see this as just attempts at freelance busting. They're just trying to get rid of independent contractors. And I think you could do shows about every profession and talk for an hour about every profession.
That's what Ron is saying here. This has nothing, I don't even think this is tin hat, Ron. This is just fact. This has nothing to do with gig workers. It's about self-employment. That's how I see it too. I see it that, like here, John Lopez is talking about the independent contractors are 59 million strong. We're 36% of the labor force. So AB5 took away jobs, and there was supposed to be jobs promised. There was going to create jobs. Still to this day, I joke. I ask, Karen Anderson, Gail Gordon, any of these people that I ask, and I'm like, hey, are you, what's, how many jobs are out there from AB5?
I'm aware of 66 new members of the Teamsters. Some trucking company made 66.
So like 1.5 million jobs and careers killed, 66 jobs created. Got it. Just wanted to put that down in the facts.
It's a ludicrous situation.
But I mean, like to the nation, 59 million. Where does that go? Like, what's the point? What's the point?
Interestingly,
what do they hope to do? They want everybody not working?
No, they want more people in unions. And if an independent contractor, by law, independent contractors cannot be unionized. So they want more people in unions. We are already something they don't want. So if our careers get destroyed, that's not really part of their thinking. If they believe they can get more people into employee roles and then unionize them, they see it as a win, no matter what the collateral damage is, because their goal is to rebuild unions. That's the goal. That's why they're trying to take the beach. And as in any war, there's collateral damage. There's people who get destroyed, and that's going to be us, is their intent.
So where are we now?
Well, we're now at my favorite and your favorite, number 5 out of 6. So you remember the problem with the ABC test in California, right? It was the B prong that killed everybody. And the B prong said, if you are in the same line of business as the person who's paying you, you are hereby now an employee, right? That was the problem. Nobody could get past B prong. Let's talk about number 5 in the newly proposed U.S. Labor Department rule. They are going to look at the extent to which the work is an integral part of the employer's business. Sure sounds an awful lot like same line of business, right?
Yeah.
Different language. We're in the same neighborhood, though, of, good luck convincing anybody that a freelance writer producing an article for the New York Times is not doing something that's integral to the business, right? They're going to look at whether they believe the work is critical, necessary, or central to the employer's principal business. And so I have to say, for the gig workers, the app-based folks out there, we're right back at the same problem you had at B prong of ABC test, right? It's all very similar.
Right, because that's not only integral; it's the only part.
The driver, I mean, like I was saying, like, you know, like we were joking around about the value of Lyft recently, or we do it a lot, but we were joking about it recently. And I was saying they got, you know, it's for just the database. And at this point, nobody wants their database because the other companies are bigger than them. So it's like they don't have buildings, they don't have vehicles, they don't have FF&E, they don't have any of that stuff. So really, like the values of these companies is just placed on only the independent contractor.
I don't know how anybody gets around this factor 5 any more than you can get around that B prong of the ABC. You know, you can be a plumber who goes and does a job for a hairstylist, but you can't be a hairstylist who does a job for a hairstylist. So it doesn't, again.
But you could be a hairstylist that does a job for a plumber.
In theory. Plumbers don't care about their hair that much, I don't think. But you never know. So that gets us to number 6. Number 6 of 6, they're going to look at whether the worker uses specialized skills in what they're doing. So if they want to look at A, are you using specialized skills? And B, are those skills contributing to a business-like initiative? The example they talk about a welder. They say there's 2 different kinds of welders. Welder number 1, let's say you have a highly skilled welder who's providing his services to a construction firm. The welder does not make any independent judgments at the job site beyond just doing what he's doing. He's not determining the sequence of work. He's not ordering materials. He's not thinking about bidding for the next job. He's not using his skills to obtain additional jobs. He's told what work to do and where to do it. In that scenario, they're saying, yeah, he's a highly skilled guy, but we think he's an employee. They then give the example of welder number 2. This guy has a specialty welding service and he's offering that up for a variety of different construction companies. He's doing some kind of marketing to generate new business. He's not only technically skilled, but he's also marketing his skills in a way that seems like a business-like initiative. So therefore, we would find him to be an independent contractor. Now, that one almost sounds reasonable, right? Until you start thinking about somebody like a computer coder, which is a very big independent contractor field right now. People who know specialized computer code and they can go in and write whatever code that the companies need to build apps and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Those guys generally they can often take on a project that's like a 6-month project as an independent contractor because it takes a while to write all that code, you know? So you're only working for the one client. You're happy with that 6-month thing that you've signed. You fully intend to go on and get other clients after that. But for that 6-month period, you can't pass this factor number 6 because even though you're a highly skilled guy doing a highly skilled thing, you're just focused on what you're doing with this one client. Same thing with like a ghostwriter who's working for a book publishing company. You don't write a book in a day. I can tell you, I've written a bunch of books. It takes more than a day to write a book. It takes a little.
I would hope so.
It takes a little time. And so you may just be working on that one ghostwriting project for a publishing company for 6 months or whatever it is, you know. And again, how do you get around that with the way some of these independent contractor careers work? I don't know how.
Yeah, I'm looking at Gail's comment here, and I think is she here trying to say that, like, so as the owner operator of the opera house, don't know many opera companies who are singers or players. Is she saying that because she's not a singer or a player, why doesn't that apply?
I don't exactly know what she means. Maybe she could post another comment.
Who aren't?
Oh, she had a typo.
Okay. Right. So don't know many. So, okay. Well, that changes the whole comment. So
she's saying there's no way they can pass it. It is, again, the whole point of this is you can see that when they start showing their hand on how they're going to interpret things, even though these things have been used in the past, even though they've been used in the courts in the past, what's happening now is these freelance busting people are now going to try to interpret them in a way that still gets them the goal that they want, which is reclassifying as many of us as possible. You can see exactly how they're doing it when you break it down, right? It's very clear.
Yeah, but again, I keep going back to, like usually a plan has an outcome. Like if you're going to take away 59 million workers' right to be independent, I don't want your force-fed job or whatever, but you should have a lot of more opportunity out there for me. If first of all, I'm not going to agree to that. I'm going to fight it. But if it did come to something like that, where are these 59 million jobs coming from?
Well, not to mention, we have had, what have we had now since the pandemic? How long have they been saying there's not enough labor? There's not enough labor. There's help wanted signs everywhere. There's jobs for whoever wants them. It's not like people can't go get a job if they want to get a job right now. There's jobs all over the place right now.
Yeah.
And people are flocking to this instead. People are saying there's more people trying to be independent contractors now than they've ever measured before. And this is actually an interesting point. The U.S. Department of Labor, buried in their 184-page proposal, they say they think there's only about 20 million independent contractors in the country. And the data that they're using to come up with that number is from 2017. They're acting as if the pandemic never happened. People didn't, Kamala Harris never wrote in the New York Times that so many women are quitting their jobs that it's a national emergency. All the new studies we've seen come out that say all these people are moving to open their own businesses, and, record-setting numbers of people filing for EIN numbers to open small businesses and become independent contractors. All of it just never even happened if you read this proposal. So they're saying the number of people they think this will actually affect, it's really, really tiny. And the other thing they say that really got my goat was they wrote, we don't think anybody who's an independent contractor will spend more than about 15 minutes looking at this, talking about this, trying to respond to this, trying to deal with this. So we're not really wasting anybody's time. It's maybe costing them like $20 of their life to deal with this. After we have all spent hours and hours testifying in their public hearings alone, let alone the past few years of all this other nonsense. It's just as if they exist in fantasy land where what they're doing is right and all of us are non-existent and it doesn't matter and they can just make stuff up. And as you said, they also write in this thing, we may also consider other things besides the 6 factors. Well, what are those things?
Right. And that's just one sentence and it just ends.
I'd like to know what those things are. Wouldn't you?
I would too. Well, I don't think they know. I don't think they know. I think they're kind of winging it. And that's what I'm saying. Like this should have a plan. This is too big to not have a plan.
I believe they do have a plan. Their plan is to get rid of as many independent contractors as they can.
But
because
independent contractors, yeah. But this is. I mean, am I wrong that this is what this country's about? We're supposed to be able to, if you can find a way to make it and not have a boss and do it on your own and be happy, and you're keeping within the legal boundaries of the law, what's the problem?
Since the day the nation was founded, you can hang out a shingle and say, I'm open for business and do business with whoever you want, as long as you say, you're within the bounds of the law. You pay your taxes, you mind your manners. 'Twas ever thus in the United States of America. And these people are coming in and trying to say, yeah, no, we think more people should be employees and in unions. And so we're going to make it a heck of a lot harder for you to try to earn a living as your own boss. We don't want your kind. You're the wrong kind. We want different kind. That's what we want. That's their goal.
Right. And I understand they want everybody to be in unions. I understand this is the push, but it's like they're pushing the exact people who are going to do everything they can to stay away from unions.
Well, Gallup recently put out a poll that all the union people are yelling about because it showed, I forget the number, but it was a big number. It was like 60 or 70 or 80%, huge percent, whatever it was, of Americans now approve of unions. That was the headline. But if you kept reading, it also found that very few people actually want to join one. So what the Gallup thing actually showed is it was kind of like, yeah, everybody agrees we're cool with vanilla ice cream being in the dairy case. We think vanilla ice cream's fine. We approve of vanilla ice cream. We're cool with it being there. But we don't really want to buy vanilla if we can get mint chocolate chip or Rocky Road. So we're okay with vanilla, but it's really not what we're going to choose to do. And that's what that Gallup poll actually showed, was the majority of Americans believe unions are good, but nobody really wants to be in one. Less than half of Americans want to be in one. So
right, it sounds to me like a question about, like, the question was more oriented at, you know, do you think it's right for unions to be allowed? And America answered with yes. I think it's right for anything to be allowed.
yeah,
However,
I'm okay with vanilla ice cream.
I don't want anything to do with it.
Right. I mean, if I could eat vanilla ice cream, somebody better be also handing me some hot fudge and maybe some cherries or whatever. Like, you know, but I'm cool with vanilla ice cream existing. I got no problem with that. I'm down with it. It's all right. So yeah. So this is ultimately the challenge they have, right? The product they're trying to sell is a product that the majority of Americans don't want. So they have to create a little pain that will make us want it. That's what's happening here.
So are they doing that though? I mean,
Well,
I know there's a Gallup poll that says vanilla ice cream and unions are cool.
Right. From my perspective, the past 3 years, I have never seen so many people from across the political spectrum, from, you know, moderate Democrats straight on across to the most conservative Republicans, joining together and saying this is wrong. From what I see, what they're doing is creating backlash that didn't need to exist. In many ways, it's Democrats attacking their own base with these freelance busting policies. A lot of the people fighting this thing are people who have voted Democrat for a lot of years. And they're like, what is happening that I'm having to deal with this all the time? Why aren't they listening to me? And then you have, of course, the Republicans coming in and pouncing on it. I think that depending on what happens in the elections next week, if, as predicted, you know, the polls are showing Republicans are probably going to take at least the House of Representatives, I think you might start to see some kind of hearings in the House, in Congress, looking at what agencies like the U.S. Labor Department have been doing with respect to putting their thumb on the scale in favor of unions. I think we might start to see some of that. Maybe not immediately, but I think it's coming. If you follow the leaders of those committees on Twitter, you see them talking about this. You see them gearing up for some kind of a fight. I think they're getting ready to start putting a bit more of a spotlight on this, at which point, you know, my hope is it doesn't just become yet another politically divisive problem, because this is a nonpartisan issue. Moderate Democrats in the United States Senate have shown that they agree with Donald Trump's labor secretary on this. You know, I can tell you when we fought the AB5 copycat bill in New Jersey, it was moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans who helped us stop it. This doesn't make sense to anybody except union organizers. That's the only people this makes sense to.
Right. Yeah. It actually just exactly reminds me of AB5. Like the first times you and I talked and whatnot, that, you know, AB5 wasn't like everybody in the state got their 2 cents in on this. Most people didn't. It was a small group of people that really got that lit.
I think if the pattern holds, we're going to see, I mean, what we saw in New Jersey was people rising up in the press, and the lawmakers couldn't ignore them. So they had to acknowledge that we existed. In the nationwide press, there has been an effort to keep independent contractors out. If you read the articles that labor reporters write in all the big media, it's almost always a headline about Uber and Lyft. It almost never includes anybody from any other profession in the story.
Right.
they're doing what they did in California, which is trying to make it seem like it's one thing when it's really something much, much bigger. They're trying to make it seem like it's specific only to app-based workers when it's hundreds and hundreds of professionals.
And that's what I said initially, was that I thought AB5 was to throw a net over the gig workers, but really it ended up casting up all over the freelancers, self-employed, people who've been in business for generations.
Like I said, this is freelance busting. This is about trying to limit the choice of self-employment in the United States because self-employed people cannot be unionized. It's very easy to understand. I don't agree with it. I think it's completely against the way this nation has been run. And, you know, I didn't start a business 20 years ago to end up having this fight now. You know, this is insane to me, but this is where we're at. This is what's going on. Hopefully, you know, you got to hope, let's say the polls are right and the Democrats take a shellacking next week in the election. Now, I know politics is very fiery right now, and I'm only talking specifically about this self-employment issue. I'm not talking about any other issues. On this issue, it has been coming from the progressive left, from the Democratic Socialists of America. The Communist Party USA has been pushing this, you know. Yep. If there's a big shellacking of Democrats next week, perhaps we'll start to see some of the moderates in the party push back on these kinds of ideas. And going forward, maybe they'll be a bit more reasonable. But I don't see that happening in places like the U.S. Labor Department that will not be affected by the elections. The elections don't affect the White House this year. They don't affect who's running these agencies and who's trying to do this rulemaking type of stuff. And it's not just the U.S. Labor Department where it's happening in the executive branch. It's also the National Labor Relations Board, the Federal Trade Commission got involved.
And I was going to ask about that too. What is up with the FTC and the NLRB getting together?
Well, what they're trying to do is have these agencies be able to work together on this issue. So, like, for instance, the Federal Trade Commission can go after companies for things like making false promises. I don't know what the exact language is, but it's things like making false promises. So let's say the FTC decides Uber's been telling drivers, you're going to make $36 an hour. And then the FTC figures out, well, the drivers are only making $12 an hour. Now, all of a sudden, the FTC can come in and say, well, we're going to file a thing against Uber and have an investigation. And we're going to now partner, since we've launched an investigation, we're going to bring in the Labor Department. We're going to bring in this other department. And now all of a sudden you have everybody piling on to that same company, to Uber. That's what these memorandums of agreement among these agencies are about. Start an investigation in one, spread it around to others. So the company will have to play defense on multiple levels at once.
So I see Tom Kelly here saying that if the Dems get smacked, we will see more of, this is his belief. This is Tom from he's the TNC radio, deals with a lot of truckers and stuff. And I think you and I were talking about this even. This is kind of what you mentioned.
He's saying if they get smacked. Oh, the executive branch will see more of this. Certainly very possible, right? Because they're going to feel desperate and cornered like trapped squirrels, right? They're going to be the last ones standing and try to use whatever authority they have to push through as much. That is one way that this could very well go.
And then the Driven Mom here says, besides making an educated vote on Tuesday, what else can be done to stop this? That's a loaded question, but
really good question. Right now, the theater of war that is active is the U.S. Labor Department, right? So we are in the public comment period right now, and it lasts now into December. If you want to be on the safe side, get it done before Thanksgiving. You can go to federalregister.gov. Just type in the words independent contractor. The very first thing that's going to pop up is what we're talking about here today. And you click on it and it very clearly says make a public comment. You just write your comment. You say, here's what I think of your 6-factor test. Here's who I am. Here's how it could affect me. Here's how it could misclassify me as an employee. Here's the economic harm that it could cause to me. Please stop what you're doing. This is a bad idea. XOXO, love Steve. That's how
not me.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's what you can do right now. And like I said, right
does
now,
that do anything though?
well,
And
what's
I'm all
happening
for
right
it,
now
but
is
does
that,
it do anything?
well, by law, they have to respond to comments about the rule. So, like I said, that whole process is being overrun by bots and spam right now. But by law, they're supposed to respond to concerns that real people raise about the rule. So, if you can be a little bit articulate, even about one part of the rule that you're worried about, that should help in the long run. Whether it's, is it going to stop them? Probably not. They've probably already got their minds made up. We talked from the top about who these folks are and their intent and what they're trying to do. But they have to follow the law. They're supposed to respond to things. And there's going to be lawsuits coming up in the federal courts. So let's get all the ammo we can to defend the beach, is how I feel about it.
So,
and I'm saying that figuratively. No one go and beat up anybody with a hammer.
Yeah, no,
That's not what I mean.
I saw a couple things in here, and Gail, of course, is like, yeah, let's get them.
Yeah,
which is why I love Gail, but don't
everybody settle down with the
Don't go get
inflammatory
'em.
language. But it is important to play defense in all these arenas, because all of this stuff is interrelated. And once it's all in the public record, inevitably lawyers are going to get their hands on it. And hopefully we win in the end.
So let me ask you this as we wrap it up here, because I think this is an important question. In a best case scenario, and maybe it's not even fully election related, I don't know, but in a best case scenario and in a worst case scenario, what does post next week look like?
So best case scenario is probably the rule goes into two things going on, right? Best case scenario, just on this issue, just specific to this issue, not specific to any other issues. You're going to end up with gridlock in Congress, right? You're going to have at least one branch of Congress controlled by Republicans. You're going to still have Joe Biden as president. So legislatively at the federal level, the problem should go away for a while. Executive branch wise, I think nothing changes. Like we talked about, I think that process continues. I think
nobody should be shocked by that either, because this has been Biden's legacy.
He campaigned on a promise to do this, to make AB 5 nationwide. So I think at that point, people in states like mine, in blue states where you still have complete control of the government in one party, places where they were talking about coming at us with this before, New Jersey, New York, Illinois. There's been talk now in Pennsylvania. There's, was it Montana? I saw the other, Minnesota, maybe.
Yeah, I heard about Minnesota too.
Might have been Minnesota. It's popping up in other places now. I think you might at that point start to see some of this come back in the states and have to gear up and fight in the states a little bit. Maybe not a little bit, maybe a lot. We'll see. Again, though, it's going to kind of depend on how bad the shellacking is. Here in New Jersey, we had an election last year or the year before, I don't know, the pandemic's all a blur, but the governor was running and all the polls had him up by a bazillion points. He's a Democrat. And all of a sudden the votes were counted and, oh my gosh, he almost lost. He came real close to losing. And the Senate president, one of the most powerful Democrats in the state, actually did lose to a truck driver named Ed
I was just going to say that, yeah.
And I was very happy about that, because that Senate president was the lead sponsor. He was our Lorena Gonzalez. He's the one who put the copycat bill forward. So depending on how bad the shellacking is, I know from people we talked to within that party here in New Jersey, where that party is very powerful, that they do not agree with how far to the left the party has gone. They think it's hurting the party. And I think you're going to see a little bit of infighting in the Democratic Party. That would be good for independent contractors if the moderates regained control. And again, I'm just talking specific to this issue. I know there's a lot of issues people feel very passionately about. I do as well. For the record, I'm a registered independent. I'm not.
Hold on. Yeah. And that's what I always make very clear on this channel, is that this isn't political, but we have to talk about political subjects because it just intertwines. There's no way to.
This is where it's coming from, right? So you got to do it. So what do I think? best case scenario with this USDOL thing, the elections will have no effect on this process. The best case scenario for this is they put it through sometime maybe over the summer next year, and immediately they get sued and it gets tied up in court and somebody wins in court. I think multiple lawsuits are going to be filed on multiple basis, like different angles of trying to take it down, and we'll see who wins. I heard a lawyer say, we're going to put multiple torpedoes in the water. It's how they described it. So, at that point, you're talking about, if it goes into effect in summer 2023, they immediately get sued. It takes until at least summer 2024 to work that out. Well, you're already at the next election. You're now at the presidential election of 2024 at that point, right? So, there's a lot going on and a lot that could happen between now and then, but politics will come into play again. And at that point, you maybe will have had some hearings on Capitol Hill about this, led by what it looks like is going to be a Republican-controlled Congress. A lot more information may start to trickle out to the general public, which has always been the problem with this issue, right? People like us who are directly in the crosshairs of this thing have started to become keenly aware of what's going on. But when you go and go to a party and try to talk to people about it and explain it, they're like, that sounds crazy. That could never happen. And you say, well, it did happen in California. Well, they'd never take it national. Well, they did. They came within 3 votes of passing it. And then they say, well, I don't think they'd actually, well, they're actually doing it now in the U.S. Labor Department. Hopefully, if we can get the issue a little bit more out there in the world, maybe that is what happens if there's some congressional hearings and things like that, where you start to get a little more media coverage that's about the issue in its entirety. You start to get more people to understand what's at stake here. And at that point, maybe it starts to resolve a little bit too. Anything could happen, who knows?
Right. But you don't see anything within the time span of, if things go horribly wrong, that by the end of the year, or shortly after the new year, anything's going to be implemented to the point where it's not going to be challenged in court.
I think there's 0 chance this does not get challenged in court.
Well, yeah.
The 100% chance there's going to be lawsuits. The question is, do the federal judges make an emergency stay or whatever the language ends up being to block the implementation while the court cases are playing out? My gut tells me they're going to block implementation until the court battles start playing out. But I guess in theory that couldn't happen, but lawyers aren't stupid. They're going to file the cases in jurisdictions where they have favorable judges who, they already beat the U.S. Labor Department once when the Labor Department tried to do this. They know where to go. It's not exactly rocket science.
Yeah.
I say that with love to the lawyers who are going to fight with us, fight for us.
Karen's comment of ram it through, that's their playbook.
She's right. They rammed it through in California. They tried to ram it through in New Jersey during the lame duck session. They tried to sneak it into the PRO Act without ever talking about it. No question. That's what's going on here.
So other than writing or making a comment right now during this period, and making sure that you vote, of course, what else can people do? Anything?
The only other thing we encourage people to do all the time at Fight for Freelancers is make your voice heard. So whether that's reaching out to whoever your newly elected officials are, maybe writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed in your local media, all of that stuff, it's kind of like kindling turns into a nice big raging fire. And the more of us who speak up and speak out, the better we're going to do. Our website is up on the screen now. It's actually .com. It's fightforfreelancersusa.com. And you can also come and find us on Facebook, where if you just type in Fight for Freelancers into Facebook, you'll find our Facebook group. And we have all different kinds of independent contractors in there. Yes, it was created by writers here in New Jersey, but we now have thousands of members, graphic designers, there's a psychiatrist who operates as an independent contractor. There's just people from all different, there are app-based drivers, there are some trucking people, there's all different kinds of people in there talking about this and trying to figure out how to fight this. And we have some good resources in there. Like if you want to file a public comment, but maybe writing isn't your thing and you feel a little self-conscious about it, we have kind of like a Mad Libs fill in the blank, how to write a public comment. You know, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is why I want to stay an independent contract. You know, we have things that can help you because we're writers and we're good. You know, we're doing what we're good at. So yeah, come and join us and make sure you make your voice heard. With a public comment, go to federalregister.gov, type in independent contractor, file your public comment, try to get it done before Turkey Day if you want to be on the safe side. And then just keep up the noise is what we always say. Just keep the volume turned up so they know we're not going away.
And you guys, I will have all of those. Right now I have the link to this website correctly, though, not the way I typed it out first, in the show notes. And I have a link to Kim's Twitter page, but I will put a link to the making your voice heard, as well as to the Facebook group that Kim's talking about too. So
I'm looking at the comments now for the first time too. It seems like we didn't suck. People are generally happy.
Oh no, there's been a lot of comments.
I'm sorry if anyone's commenting at me. I'll have to go back and look.
No, they were all good. In fact, usually I bring them up and I'll like star them, but I kind of wasn't doing that today because they were all talking amongst themselves along with our conversation. So it was actually really, really well done because I had a couple of moderators in here too that were keeping an eye on things, and everything was good. It was all a great conversation. It was all following this. So Kim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this, because a lot of people can't put it as well as articulate it as well as you can for us sometimes. So I really do appreciate you coming on and doing this, especially because this is a crazy time that I don't know. I mean, I'm not just a gig worker. I don't just work gig platforms. So to me, freelancing and being self-employed is a must. Like I can't go, if I have 10 things I do, I can't choose which one I'm going to do. It won't pay the bills.
For me, it's 100% of my income, and it has been for 20 years intentionally.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I was a staff editor in newspapers and magazines for a decade. I like this better. I make more money. I'm happier. I prefer it. And I like to say, you know, everybody brings something to the table on this issue, and together we are very, very strong as a group. The thing that writers bring is, if these people want to fight with the written word, game on, baby. That's where we excel. So that's where the leaders of Fight for Freelancers really can shine and help people. Oh my God, somebody's comparing me to the Jedis. I love it. I'm a big Star Wars and Star Trek and all those things. I love the Marvel thing, all of it. I'm very into it. And now there's going to be a Christmas one where the Guardians of the Galaxy kidnap Kevin Bacon. I'm very excited about all of it. But yeah, if you're in a profession where you have something to say and you don't know how to say it, Fight for Freelancers can help you, because again, created and run by freelance writers, we're very good at the arguing with words, whether it's on Twitter, public comments, op-eds. We can help with that. And we've been doing it now since 2019. So you probably aren't going to have an idea we haven't run into already among our thousands of members. And everybody really does work together. There's lots of writers and editors in that group, and everybody comes up with really good ideas and is willing to help the people who maybe aren't as comfortable fighting with words, but who have a great story to tell that should be told. This is why we're here. And it's all grassroots. We pay for it all ourselves. Like, I just paid the annual bill for our website, which I think was $114 total. People keep accusing us of taking dark money because our website looks good. And I'm like, yeah, $100, that's going to break us in life. But we all just do it in our spare time. So it's a really, really great group of people who are really just across the board, some liberal, some conservative. It's a lot of women. We're a lot of women in our group, but we got men, and everybody's just very dedicated to wanting to keep our incomes and our careers. And we all agree on this thing. We do not allow political bashing and stupidity in our group. If you're going to come in and be one of those flame throwing lunatics on social media, we kick you out.
Yeah.
So we try to make sure it's a safe space. Gets a little heated sometimes, you know, people are passionate about it, but we really, really try hard to make everybody feel welcome. So no matter who you are, no matter what you do, if you want to come join us at Fight for Freelancers, we would love to have you.
Yeah. And honestly, you want to be where Kim is. I do. I want to be where Kim is because I want to know what's going on. I'll get the quickest pulse on the situation. Because I'm sure I'll be like tweeting her next week right after the election saying, okay, there's the numbers. What now what?
What does this all mean? Yeah. Like I'm some expert. I mean, I'm just some lady sitting on her couch, but we've made a lot of friends in Washington and in legal circles. And, you know, you do this for a couple of years and people figure out you're articulate. All of a sudden they want to help you. So we have a lot of really smart people giving us a lot of information and advice. And I say that it's coming from both sides of the aisle. So we are pleased that we've been able to do that. Sometimes it pays to be a geek. We're shining in our geekdom on this issue. And we're happy to have anyone come join us who wants to help with the fight.
Yeah. You guys check out all of Kim's stuff. If you're on Twitter, and Twitter's a safer place now. So if you're on Twitter, check out Kim, but check out fightforfreelancersusa.com. You know, check out Karen Anderson's group, check out Gail Gordon's story. You can find all that on this channel too. We've gone through all this stuff before, and I've had Kim on a couple times too. So, but this is not time to screw around. It's time to, even if you're doing everything you can, here's how I'd say it, is at least stay aware. Don't put your guard down because, not that they did in California, but nobody expected what happened there. Everybody's like, that's not going to happen. Everybody. And it happened.
It happened. And it's going to happen again if we don't stop them. So file those public comments, federalregister.gov, type in independent contractor. Get it done before Turkey Day.
I will put it in the show notes as soon as this show's over, guys, so you don't even have to look it up. You'll be able to just click it and do it.
Yeah.
So with that said, you guys, thank you all for joining us. I see that we had quite a few people in here today, and a good mix of people too. I really am happy to see this. I'm going to have to go back through all these comments after it processes because there was a ton in here today. And yeah, and thank you all for joining us. Kim, thank you for your time. It's so helpful, and at least it like calms everybody down a little bit.
I love talking to you, Steve, and I think you have a great show, and I listen to it. I'm a fan of the show in addition to being an occasional guest. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Kim. All right, everybody, you have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon.